Dawn bled slowly across the rooftops of Winterfell, a chill, pewter-tinted light that stirred the frost-laden towers and rolled in muted shimmers across the frozen pools of the Godswood. Lyanna Stark stood barefoot on the terrace above the great hall, hair unbound, cloak flung over a chemise that did nothing to answer the bite of northern wind. She welcomed the cold. It steadied the pulse that had hammered through her skull most of the night, and it dwarfed the sound of her racing thoughts beneath the quiet hush of snow whispering at stone. Every bannerman's horn in the yard below seemed poised to split the air at any moment, yet none of them blew. For a single heartbeat, Winterfell was perfectly still, suspended between one breath and the next, until a raven sliced the silence, cawing as it banked toward Maester Wylla's rookery with a rag-sealed message bound to its leg. The letter had reached her father first, stamped with the broken harp of Prince Rhaegar, and countersigned by Lord Jon Connington from Griffin's Roost, the hand that delivered for the crown while Tywin Lannister lurked at Casterly Rock. It was courteous, formal, an apology wrought in careful courtly phrases. "I regret the public misunderstanding at Harrenhal. I did not intend to give insult or cause you concern." The words might have done their duty had they not arrived weeks after Brandon was already riding south with fiery outrage prickling beneath his furs, cursing a dragon's arrogance all the way to King's Landing. Lyanna had listened in the solar while her father read the letter aloud to Benjen and Maester Wylla, his voice measured but strained. Even then she heard the soft groan in the timber, her father's fingers clenching too hard about the parchment, as though words could bruise. She could not forget that sound, nor the way Benjen's gaze slipped toward her, and then away, as though he feared what he might find in her face. Excitement, disgust, or worse, a glimmer of longing for the flicker of silver hair in a sea of dark. She felt none of those things now, only dread, thick and unyielding, pressed against her ribs with every breath. She had tried to speak to Brandon before he left, tried to explain that Rhaegar had simply crowned her the queen of love and beauty, a pageant's flourish with no meaning beyond his sudden need for symbolism. Yet the clamor of the yard, the clattering of horses being saddled, and Brandon's own tempestuous laughter had swallowed her words whole. Her elder brother had called it a brazen insult, an indignity aimed at Robert Baratheon and at House Stark, and he swore to make the dragon prince choke upon his own courtesy. The ravens that followed bore blacker tidings. Brandon's arrest with the 6 companions who rode beside him, Lord Rickard's demand for trial by combat, Aerys' mockery of that ancient rite, and wildfire devouring courage and skin alike in the Red Keep's courtyard. The last scroll arrived 2 nights ago, written in an ink that tasted of soot and bile. "Your father and brother are dead, burned and strangled on the king's orders. The North must do what it can to save the rest of its sons." Ned now rode with Robert, Jon Arryn, and half the Stormlands at his back. War was no longer a rumor. The banners of Baratheon, Stark, Tully, and Arryn had unfurled upon the wind like bloody sails. And Lyanna, who loved the quiet hush of first snowfalls, who danced better with a blade than with lords in a hall, felt chained to a fate forged by men's pride. She pressed her palm to the icy stone of the Merlin and let the frieze seep upward through her bare arm. A silent offering to the old gods whom southern priests sneered at and Aerys spat upon in madness. Her father's death had carved something hollow inside her, yet the emptiness was not mere grief. It was a cavity that echoed faintly with possibility. If one man's madness could summon such ruin, could another's defiance end it? She had lied once to the stable boys, told them she only wished to exercise Spearshaker, the lean gray mare who loved to run the Wolfswood trails, but instead she'd raced to the holdfast by the White Knife where traveling smiths wintered. There she persuaded a swordsmith's wife for a shirt of mail fine as summer rain, small enough for her shoulders. She tested its fall beneath a faded riding cloak, saw how steel disappeared in folds of muddy brown, and knew she could vanish just as easily. That night she lay awake upon fur blankets, counting each beat of her heart, until she imagined them pinprick lanterns on a road winding south. Winterfell, Moat Cailin, King's Landing. Every league whispered the same thought. Aerys Targaryen killed your father. Aerys Targaryen must die by your hand. Each time the sentence told it, seemed more like an oath than a notion. She might have dismissed it. She was no assassin, no sellsword. Yet dawn after dawn, the resolve remained, cold and inexorable as the wall. She heard other voices, Benjen pleading caution, Ned reminding her that Robert loved her fiercely, even Brandon's ghost laughing that a girl could not cross half a realm unseen. But the oldest voices of all were those beneath the heart tree. A wolf must sometimes stalk alone, and winter comes for every king. She left Winterfell the day the first real thaw opened the King's Road. Sir Roderick Castle led a patrol northward to Flint's Finger. She followed the column until the mists thickened, and then slipped beyond sight, as light-footed as any shadowcat. The swordsmith's wife had given her a boiled leather jerkin to dull the silver ring of mail, and she wrapped her hair in a faded green scarf that once belonged to Nan. With the hood pulled low, she might pass for a stripling squire, pale but spare of frame. Into her saddlebag went a whetstone, a skin for water, the silvered brooch in the shape of a dire wolf, the only heirloom she dared carry, and the dagger whose edge she had honed each night until it could shave hair from flesh. In the smithies, dim forge, the weapon looked ordinary, a narrow blade of castle-forged steel, hilt wrapped in black leather. Yet when she whispered her father's name to it, the metal seemed to drink the syllables and grow colder still. She rode south in silence, traveling at dawn and dusk, sleeping days in the shade of watchtowers, abandoned after centuries of uneasy peace. Sometimes she heard drums rolling through the green expanse west of the road, Baratheon's vanguard perhaps, hammering cadence for peasants ripping stakes from berry fields to serve as makeshift spears. Once she saw smoke curling on the horizon, thicker than mere chimney plumes. She pressed onward, eyes stinging as the wind carried a faint tang of pitch and flesh. War had begun without waiting for any prince's song. Every milestone left behind was a prayer unanswered. And still, Aerys lived. At the neck she abandoned Spear Shaker to the reed ferrymen, paying their silence with silver and the whispered name of Howland. Greywater Watch rose like a dream from mist-shrouded reeds, and there she found the slight, thoughtful lord who once knelt before her with a wreath of blue winter roses clasped to his heart. He had not forgotten the kindness shown him beside the laughing tree. His crannogmen offered ropes through bog channels and silent skiffs that parted cattail stalks with hardly a flutter. No southern tacksman dared their waters, not even Hoster Tully's outriders. Howland's sister Mira pressed pouches of dried eels and chunks of salt-harvested lichen upon Lyanna's palm and made her swear she would taste them only in desperation. Mira's eyes brimmed with tears that would not fall. Lyanna met them with her own, willing their unspoken dread into something like strength. South of the neck, the air grew warmer, the ground firmer, yet dread lay heavier upon the world. Villages burned in the riverlands where lords loyal to the crown dragged men from byres and branded them rebels because they tipped wedges of bread to passing Tully riders. Lyanna slept once in an empty sept, whose candles had guttered among the bones of its septon. Rats scurried across shattered icons of the Seven. She kicked away a cracked tile painted with the maiden's face, her stomach twisting at the irony that men slaughtered in the name of chastity and honor, while the gods they swore by lay trampled. Not all roads were terror. At Maidenpool, she earned a silver stag, singing an old winter town ballad in Three Maidens' Pavilion, her voice hushed beneath scrawny willow. The coin bought her passage aboard a whale blubber skiff hugging the coast to Duskendale, where she disembarked before dawn and stole clothing from a salt-stiffened line. Loose woven breeches and a sallow tunic that stank of tallow. The disguise felt grimier but safer. Few looked twice at a ragged dockhand with hands too dainty for true toil. It was in Duskendale that she first heard the whispers. There is a new wolf in the south, not the lord but his sister, spoken in dark corners as if rumor itself could conjure her blade into existence. Thought chilled her. She had tried to be invisible, yet phantom shadows of her purpose slid ahead of her. She left under clouded sky, pushing a stolen mule along a cart track that wound through the rolling Kingswood. Each night she pressed ear to ground, listening for hoofbeats that spoke of royal patrols. Each dawn she thanked the quiet and pressed farther. King's Landing appeared a fortnight later, a smear of ruddy haze over slouching walls stained black with millennia of smoke. She reined the mule upon a low ridge to watch the city wake, gulls spiraling over Blackwater Bay, A shimmering path of quicksilver where sun-kissed, half-frozen water, tendrils of pale steam rising from dung fires in Flea Bottom. Even from miles away she smelled the rot. The sour-sweet stench of refuse and spilt wine and unwashed humanity. And beneath it all, faint but ever-present, the sharp medicinal tang of wildfire, as if the alchemists brewed oceans of it beneath the cobbles. The city looked less like the crown of a realm than a feverish wound, scabbed with broken spires. She entered by the King's Gate at dusk, folded into a caravan of wool merchants from Maidenpool. None questioned her forged seal, 2 leaping trout bookending Maester Wallace's copied script, though a gold cloak fondled the purse at her belt with a greedy thumb. She let him steal 2 coppers. Better he believe her poor enough to merit pity, not suspicion. Inside the walls, the streets narrowed into crooked veins, pulsing with lantern light and the stink of tallow. She slid along them like blood. Silent, swift, avoiding torches where the gold cloak swung truncheons for pleasure. The red keep loomed atop Aegon's high hill, crimson stone swathed now in torchlight that set every merlon ablaze. It was a fortress built against siege, but not against whispers, and in the wine sinks below street of silk tongues flapped freely. The king is mad. The king hears voices. Tonight he will burn his own hand, tomorrow perhaps the city. Many drank on that speculation, some weeping, others grinning as though Armageddon were sport. Lyanna kept to the shadows, gleaning names of guards whose greed outpaced their loyalty. One such soul was Harlan Thorne, a gold-cloak sergeant with debt to Master Armorer Salar the Bent. 3 dragons' weight of silver might arrange a passage through the postern on the southern wall of Maegor's Holdfast, the drunkard boasted. Lyanna lacked dragons but possessed something sharper, leverage. She followed him into a brothel where a lanky Rivers girl warmed his lap, listened for a moment when he muttered that Salar would carve his eyes if next moon's payment failed, then left him a folded scrap near his boot. "I can erase debt. Meet me midnight, Cobbler's Square." The message bore no signature, yet when the hour tolled he came, hooded and trembling. They discussed terms behind stacked barrels that reeked of cod. She offered relief of debt and future coin. He eyed her slight stature, the scarf masking lower face, but greed smothered doubt. He told her of sentry patterns, of blind corners where shadows pooled, of a tunnel linking the Dragon Pit dungeons to Maegor's copper cellars. She memorized each, and paid him with 2 promissory slips. Whether Salar honored such slips did not matter. By dawn Harlan would slumber under poppy-laced wine, pockets lighter, conscience heavier. For days she mapped the lower keep, countenancing fleas and mildew to trace servants' passages. She sold the mule for a night's lodging in a tanner's loft, spent evenings stitching pockets into her jerkin, each one holding a single folded shard of dragonglass smuggled from a brace of Roth smugglers near Saltshore. Dragonglass pleased her for its legend, that it slew demons of ice, and for its silence when drawn. She wore steel openly, only at need. Blades glinting in lamplight drew eyes. On the 3rd night, she reached the undervaults, catacombs where dragon skulls once lined the walls. Only 2 remained, monstrous and melancholy, jaws agape as though pleading for rebirth. She slipped between them, remembering old Nan's tales. That dragon fire melts even the wall. Would Aerys' wildfire melt kingdoms? If she failed, perhaps. She traced cool ivory with reverence, then pushed on until a stair wound upward, narrowing until she smelled fresh straw and oiled metal. She emerged behind a wooden screen. Beyond, the hush of the royal armory. Racks of pikes, crossbows strung but unbolted, suits of plate awaiting their knights. It was there she almost faltered. Gleam of steel and scent of oil conjured Brandon's voice again, laughter echoing as he practiced cuts in Winterfell's yard. It struck her then that she would be no different from him. Another stark dead beneath a dragon's shadow, if she misstepped even once. Yet the memory hardened into resolve. She took a stiletto from the rack, balance perfect, hilt of black iron inset with garnets. She tucked it under her jerkin and whispered her brother's name. Sunset of the 4th day brought her first glimpse of Aerys. She had bribed a laundress with half a silver stag to join the line of servants bearing sheets to the Tower of the Hand. From a narrow window, as they climbed the servants' stair, she saw the king in his solar, alone, save for Corlton Chelsted the pyromancer. Aerys moved like a broken marionette, jerking, twitching, fingers constantly dredging through hair crusted in grease. His beard, once lustrous, now matted with flakes of skin. Despite the distance, she felt the heat of his regard lash outward as he whipped toward the pyromancer, eyes aflame. She could not hear the words, yet Chelsted flinched as though scalded. Aerys laughed, a sound so ragged it scraped her bones. Then the king seized a vial from the table and hurled it. Green fire blossomed across the marble, a quick unnatural light that extinguished itself, but left a stain the hue of serpents. Lyanna staggered back, colliding with the laundress behind her. The woman cursed, and Lyanna mumbled apology, pressing deeper into the bundle of linens to hide shaking hands. That laugh, there was nothing human left in it. How could such a thing rule? When the line reached the laundry, she slipped out into an alcove, steadying her breath. She realized she would not feel pity if the stiletto found that thin, feverish throat. She would feel only winter's long exhale and the hush that follows a blizzard's end. That night, she ventured again into the tunnels, charting a route to the king's chambers. Harlan's directions proved true. At the second hour after midnight, the sentry at the postern dozed by brazier fumes, spear clutched loosely. She slid past. A narrow shaft ascended beside a scribe's closet. She wriggled through, scaled footholds chipped into stone that stank of bat guano, until she reached a grated vent overlooking a corridor draped in rotting tapestries. Through the grate, she watched Lord Chelsted depart the king's door. Face ashen. After him came Grand Maester Pacelle, beard trembling, his breath a wheeze. 2 Kingsguard flanked them. Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Boros Blount, blank masks of discipline. Yet she marked a flicker of unease when wild laughter spilled from behind the closed door after the counselors left. Even the white cloaks feared him. She retreated before dawn and slept in straw. She dreams whirled. Her father's voice chanting verses of the winter song. Benjen chasing her across iced ponds. Ned's earnest eyes pleading caution, Robert roaring toast to their future. Faces melted into the green glare of wildfire, then into her own reflection in spring meltwater. A shade of herself, older, crowned with snow. She woke with throat raw, half convinced she had screamed. The days bled together. War raged beyond the city. Tywin Lannister still sat idle at Casterly Rock like a lion choosing when to pounce. Ravens perched upon the rookery, with wings ragged from distance, bearing tidings of Robert's victory at Summerhall. Targaryen loyalists, hacking towns at the Trident. None spoke of Stark vengeance, yet rumors of Ned's march up Crownland's roads drifted through taverns like campfire smoke. The city tightened. Gates were sealed at dusk. Aerys ordered caches of wildfire, placed beneath granaries, beneath the Sept of Baelor, beneath the Dragon Pit. Lyanna learned of each cache from the mutterings of Chelsted's apprentices, who drank too heavily at the quill and tankard. The pyromancers whispered that a purge was coming, that fire would cleanse traitors root and branch. Her dagger felt suddenly too small to end this madness. Yet she clung to the plan. A single blade slipped between ribs was quieter than wildfire. A single death need not torch a city. If she killed the king, the fighting might end. Rhaegar was absent, rumored south marshalling Reachman. If Ned arrived before Rhaegar, the realm could bend around a regency, maybe even a council. She would surrender herself then, confess, let the lords decide her fate. One life for thousands. It sounded almost simple when whispered in darkness. On the 22nd night she moved. The city lay restless under heavy clouds, torches guttering in a wind that smelled of seaweed and rain. She donned dark breeches, mail shirt, jerkin, cloak black as midnight feathers. Around her waist, she tied a length of knotted rope. She slid the stiletto along her forearm inside a leather brace and tucked the castle-forged dagger at her hip. Then she breathed Winterfell's air in memory, crisp, pine-laced, and stepped into alleys rank with sour wine. At Maegor's postern the sentry lay slumped, mouth parted, drunk on arbor red purchased with coins she'd slipped him earlier. She eased the door, felt hinges groan, froze until snores resumed, then stepped inside. The keep's innards were a warren of narrow stairs and overhanging passages. She walked them like she owned them, slowing only at intersections where tapestries fluttered. Once she glimpsed a Kingsguard helm rounding a far bend, moonlight slithering across polished white enamel. Yet she turned into a scullery before he saw her. Rats scattered over a table sodden with broth. Their skittering drowned her soft footfalls. The upper corridor smelled of lavender oil and rot. A brazier hissed low, embers pulsing crimson. 2 doors stood ahead, lacquered redwood banded in bronze. Beyond the left lay the king's audience chamber. Beyond the right, his bedchamber. She hesitated. Through the left door she heard voices, Aerys ranting in high, brittle cadence. Someone rested within, perhaps a page. Perhaps only madness itself. She took the right. Inside, gloom swirled. A candelabrum guttered near the bed's foot. 5 tapers melted into grotesque waxy pillars. Curtains of Myrish lace drifted in the draught. Between them, she saw the faint outline of a figure upon the bed, limbs splayed as though crucified by dreams. Grease-cake hair spilled upon pillows. The king lay alone. She shut the door with a careful click. Each step felt thunderous to her own ears, though the carpet dulled every sound. She drew the dagger. The blade looked pale, almost timid, beneath candle blur. Near the bed she paused, pulse roaring. She recalled her father's last words. None recorded them, yet she conjured an image. Rickard Stark roasting alive, steel cage heating around him, voice hoarse but unbroken, cursing king. She let that image steady her hand. She reached the bedside. One thrust under the jaw into brain. Maester Welles had said once, "Kills true." She lifted the blanket. Silken, heavy, time folding around her in a hush. Then Aerys's eyes snapped open. They were green, wildfire green, and instantly lucid. He moved with a serpent speed, clawing at her wrist. Bones popped. He shrieked, a sound like metal rending. She struck anyway. The dagger grazed his collarbone, slicing through nightshirt and flesh, but missing the fatal mark. Hot blood spurted. Aerys howled. He bit her arm, teeth rank. She wrenched free. The door banged open. Sir Meryn's voice shouted. Lyanna plunged the dagger again, this time burying it deep beneath the sternum. Aerys convulsed, froth streaming. She yanked free, crimson spray baptizing her. Meryn lunged, sword gleaming. She rolled across the bed, dropped to floor, seized the candelabrum, and flung molten wax into his visor. He roared, blinded. She leapt, shoulder first, slamming him aside. Boris Blount barreled through. Lyanna ducked, blade flashing. Edge met silk of his cloak, then flesh of thigh. He stumbled. She sprinted, sliding beneath Meryn's flailing sword, bolting into corridors slick with fresh torch smoke. Behind her chaos erupted, shouts, boots pounding. She ran, blood-slick dagger gripped tight, cloak billowing. 3 turns led to the servant's stair. She dove down, skipping steps, hearing the clang of pursuit. At the landing she slammed into a maid carrying wine, red cascaded. She shoved past, burst into a gallery, shattered a stained glass window with elbow, and hurled herself into black air. She fell 10 feet onto a slanted roof of fired clay tiles. They cracked, sliding. She slid with them, catching a gutter before plummeting farther. Pain bloomed in ribs. Torches flared below, outer ward alive with alarm. Bells clanged, frantic. She spat blood, pushed upward. A clothesline stretched to the wall walk. She wrapped rope about wrist and swung. Landing jarred ankles but held. She scrambled along parapet. Archers shouted. An arrow hissed past, biting stone. She dashed into shadow of a turret where the postern tunnel began. Inside she plunged into dark, heart hammering. Steps echoed behind. Her pursuers knew the route. She raced through slime-slick corridor, lungs burning, emerging in cellars stacked with dusty amphorae. A hatch above led to the outer bailey. She clambered. When her head broke into night air, she tasted rain on tongue. The bailey seethed with gold cloaks. She slipped among wagons, crouched behind barrels. Thunder boomed, masking footsteps. She skirted to smithy, seized a hooded cloak drying on a peg, donned it, hid blood-streaked tunic beneath folds. A blind beggar huddled near the gatehouse arch. She pressed a silver stag into his palm and took his grimy cap. The man never looked up. Through the arch, the mud gate yawed. Carts jammed with grain waited departure. She blended behind a drover, shoulders hunched. Rain hammered harder, torches sputtering. Guards checked each wagon with bored eyes. A hooded squire covered in mud raised no interest. She stepped onto the Blackwater Bridge just as the first horns of alarm shrieked from the inner keep. Higher pitched, urgent. "The king is dead." Someone screamed behind. Gates rattled, commanded shut. But she was past. Horses reared, carts lurched, confusion blossomed. She kept walking. Slow, steady, until darkness swallowed her. On the far bank, she stopped beneath a willow, breath ragged. She wiped the dagger clean on wet grass, tore away blood-stiff scarf, and stared at her shaking hands. Rain washed crimson into the river. Somewhere bells tolled, spreading like ripples from a stone. She felt neither triumph nor relief, only a vast echoing quiet. Lightning split sky, revealing clouds rolling like dark banners. South lay war and retribution. North lay home and reckoning. She slid the dagger into belt, lifted hood, and stepped onto the wild King's Road once more. A solitary wolf beneath a storm no longer bound to crown or hearth, its future written in rain, and the distant thunder of armies that had not yet learned their king was ash. Inchair. PGSQL. King's Landing was a hornet's nest torn open, and every corridor of the Red Keep thrashed with wings of rumor. Servants fled chamber to chamber clutching pillows, as though cloth might muffle the fact of regicide. Maesters dashed for the rookery with scrolls half-sealed, quills dripping on marble. The King's Guard, white cloaks flaring like panicked gulls, surged through galleries in disarray, shouting passwords that changed twice before each bell toll. Aerys' corpse lay cooling in a pool no steward dared mop. His blood congealing around scatterings of emerald glass from vials shattered in his final convulsion. The torchlight skating over that gore turned red to black, black to green, then red again, as if the stain itself argued with the eye. In the antechamber outside, Grand Maester Picel slumped on a cushioned settle, a hand pressed to his chest. The shock might have felled a man with fewer winters. Pride alone kept him upright now. He had examined the king's body, once, twice, hoping for any flicker of breath, but the dagger had pierced the great vessel near the heart, and blood still welled each time Picel nudged the wound. Beside him knelt Lord Carlton Chelsted, equal parts terror and calculation in his gaze. They spoke in frantic whispers drowned beneath clangor from the yard, yet anyone reading their lips could taste the words, caches, wildfire, the city alight if one spark leapt astray. In the corner Varys watched, hands folded into voluminous lavender sleeves, face composed in a mask of solemn pity that never reached his eyes. 2 corridors away Prince Viserys wailed. The boy was scarcely 7, yet the sound poured from him like molten iron tipped upon an anvil, each sob a hammer-stroke ringing through the keep. Elia Martell cradled him, brown fingers stroking pale silver hair, humming the soft cadence of a Dornish lullaby that fooled no one. Near her stood Sir Jaime Lannister, expression caught between nausea and furious clarity. His armor still rattled faintly from the run that carried him here, but he had arrived too late, sword in hand, to find Aerys already dead. Now he stared at his blade's reflection. The Mad King's blood on steel not his own, his white cloak flecked with wax from the candles. Lyanna Stark toppled in flight. Guilt battled relief behind green eyes. "We must bar the gates," Picel croaked at last, rising. "Without a crowned king, the realm will fly apart." Chelsted's lips trembled against words that would not form. Only Varys answered, voice as silken as spider thread. "My lords, the gates mean little should Lord Tywin arrive before resolution. Best we declare for the rightful heir with haste. The Prince of Dragonstone must be summoned." "Nah. Rhaegar is in the south," Jaime muttered, still staring at his sword. "Ravens ride slower than armies." Then let them take wing now, Varys replied. What else, if not haste, will keep wildfire from cleansing this confusion? Pycelle winced at that word. Chelstead dragged a shaking hand across his brow. The king ordered it, the master of coin whispered, flinching from his own reminder. Hay hid casks beneath Beller's sept, beneath the guild halls, even under the flea-bottom potter's kilns. If talk of his death, sparks riot. You will guard those casks, Pycelle commanded, finding authority in the tatters of his dignity. Seal every alchemist's door. Disperse the guild, on my name. And mine, Jaime said, sheathing the sword with sudden finality. I will station white cloaks at each vault. Varys bowed minutely. Then I shall wake the court scribes. The city must see a banner raised come sunrise, lest they raise their own. None answered. Somewhere below, a hammer began to toll slow strokes on iron. 1, 2, summoning the small folk to the curtain walls. Dawn still bruised the sky, but rumor was faster than light. By the time the first shaft of sun struck the sea, half the capital would know the king lay dead, and the other half would swear they knew who wielded the knife. Lyanna Stark's name did not pass the council's lips that night, yet her shadow threaded every corner. Varys suspected, for whispers traveled hallways as readily as mice, but suspicion needed proof before prophecy. He would gather that proof once the realm calmed. Pycelle clung to denial. No northern girl could breach the Red Keep while cloaked guards watched, and Chelstead, fearing ignited vaults, cared only for removing sparks from powder. Jaime alone pictured the assassin, though he would not name her. His memory conjured a gray cloak whipping through smoke, a slight form vaulting a stair rail, eyes fierce as midwinter's stars behind a frayed scarf. He might have imagined those eyes, yet he would remember them forever, for they were the color of wolf's eyes inked onto a child's toy shield long, long ago in the yard of Casterly Rock. Outside the walls, Lyanna rode. She had stolen no horse this time. Rather, she paid 3 coppers for a packer headed north with empty saddlebags, and a rider too drunk to care who guided the reins. She sat crooked in the saddle, because the dagger wound Aerys gave her bled anew beneath leather. His teeth had broken skin on her forearm. Her ribs throbbed from the roof fall. The rain that masked her escape had chilled bones beneath mail, and though she forced herself into the steady rhythm of travel, every step jarred her bruises. Yet pain itself steadied her mind. Each pulse of it reminded her she moved, she breathed, while her father's pyre lay quenched decades in a crypt, and her brother's charred bones smoldered in memory alone. She took the Rosby Road first, skirting farmsteads where smoke curls flagged dawn cookfires. Children chased dogs in muddy lanes. A shepherd lifted a lazy hand as she passed. Another spat, suspicious. Word of blood on the crown would find them by nightfall. She watched their faces, wondering if their grandchildren might sing songs of the wolf maid who slew a dragon king, or curse her as villain, spark of chaos. Neither mattered. She rode simply, because stillness would have devoured her. Keep moving, the wind said. Keep moving until you choose what future to claim. Beneath the hood she rehearsed what she would tell Ned. She found no tidy version. When memory replayed the king's eyes snapping open, her heart still jolted. The kill was not clean. It was a wrestling in the dark, the taste of grease and bile, the reek of madness. She had ended it, yet not neatly, not with the grace old songs lent heroes. Would Ned see madness ended or honor broken? Would Robert? And if their judgments differed, which would she bear? She could not dwell on that yet. By mid-morn she left the packer with a tinker headed for Stokeworth, accepting a narrow cart track into hay-scented fields where no patrols rode. She traveled light-footed among reeds, wrapped dagger in linen, so rust would not kiss the blade, drank pond water cupped cold between shaking hands. Insects rasp summer warnings. She thought of Ned's words from letters years back. River flies bite harder than north wind. Those letters arrived every spring with seeds from old stones pressed between pages. She had never planted them. Old stones needed river soil, not Winterfell's frost. Now she wondered if any letters waited on Maester Wya's desk, still unopened, telling how brothers might survive a war already ended by one sister's hand. 2 days she navigated hedgerows and byroads, always angling west toward the Trident. Supplies thinned. She ate the last of Mira's dried eels, then chewed strips of raw turnip begged from a peddler who guessed her for an orphan boy. Nights she nestled under elder trees, listening to distant thunder that might have been artillery or sky. Once she woke to find 3 knights camped 100 yards downslope, Blue Ox banner flickering in fire glow. She watched them until dawn, hearing talk carried faint on breeze. Victory at Summerhall, Lord Connington's rout, Robert's hammer falling again and again. They did not mention the king's death. Rumor moved slower outside city walls. On the 5th evening, smoke dirtied the horizon where the Mummers Ford bent silver between grassy banks. She crested a rise to see charred wagons strewn along the road like toy blocks, kicked by an angry child. The stench of scorched meat told of butchered horses and men both. Vultures spiraled, their wings black scythes cutting low sunlight. Lyanna's breath caught. She smelled not just ruin but memory, sweet burning hair in Redkeep courtyard. She forced the mare onward, skirting corpses armored in sigils both stag and dragon. No side had claimed the field. Arrows jutted from mud like crooked reeds. Shields lay half-sunken, water pooling in painted lions and roses turned to blood-speckled mud. She dismounted to search the slain, hand on dagger, though her limbs quaked. She needed no map. Each face could have been Ned, Robert, or Benjamin's. None were. But war had stamped them equal, mouths agape, eyes blank. Among the fallen she found a child no more than 14, male drowned in his own blood. A wooden brooch, shaped like a trout, still clutched at tunic. Tully colors. She knelt, fingers brushing lids shut. Might hasty men call that boy traitor or hero? Neither title weighed as heavy as his curved spine beneath her palm. She stayed until the sun's rim touched treeline. Then she dug, hands raw, burying him beside a mangled destrier. She set his shield over the mound, trout facing sky. She owed him that quiet in death. The mare balked at leaving, but night urged haste. She found a shallow ford upstream, waters tinted rust with blood washed from battlefield. On the far bank she collapsed under oaks, too spent to light fire. Sleep came jagged, full of green flames racing gutters of black wall. Her father walked through them unburnt, reaching, but his hand dissolved into snow. She woke with a gasp and realized dawn had come. That same dawn, far to the south on the King's Road near Bitterbridge, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen sat astride Blackfire and felt a shiver run his spine. Ravens had flown through the night from King's Landing to every campfire along his march, but their messages were fragmentary at first. Disturbance in Maegor's holdfast, the king wounded, a disarray of conflicting seals. Near midnight a rider arrived, flagged white and red, panting a single phrase. "Your father is dead." Rhaegar had dismounted then, kneeling in damp grass, palms pressed to earth as if he might feel the realm's pulse falter. Lords begged command. Ride back, press on. But he asked only silence. Now the day after, he broke it. "We turn north," he ordered Lord John Connington. Voice a quiet sword. "Half the host rides hard with me. The rest remains under your command to watch Mace Tyrell. Should he question this course, remind him I am the king now." Connington had paled. He had expected to face Robert Baratheon upon the river, not the void of a throne behind him. Yet he nodded, fist to heart. Rhaegar rode out, standards streaming, three-headed dragon yet unblackened by defeat, and the dawn glared off his helm like the promise of storm. In his mind questions coiled. Who dared breach the Red Keep? Who among the lords grew bold enough to carve crown from skull? He thought of Tywin, of Tyrell, even of Varys with whispers spun sharp as blade. Yet one name never occurred, for he had last seen Lyanna Stark crowned in blue roses beneath Harrenhal's shattered tower, laughing shyly as campfires danced in her eyes. News reached Robert 2 mornings later, carried by Ned Stark's own hand. They camped near the ruins of the Fellwood, their tents spiked in churned soil still damp with yesterday's rain. Horses stamped and snorted, smiths hammered rivets, cooks stirred pots heavy with dripping boar fat. Yet hush fell across the war camp when Ned emerged from the command tent. face carved from granite. He spoke low to Robert, offering the raven scroll. Robert scanned, jaw going slack, then barked laughter so raw it cracked. "Dead," he roared. "The old bastard is dead. And not by my hand." Edwin Royce flinched. Thoros of Myr paused mid-swig. Even the crows on wagons lifted wings wider. Robert crushed the scroll, swung his warhammer overhead, and for a moment Ned feared he would strike the nearest oak in frustration. Yet the hammer paused, trembling, then lowered. "Who?" Robert asked. Ned stared at the dirt. "They do not say. Kingsguard blame an intruder. Rumors claim the king's own pyromancers lit mishap. Some whisper of Lannister betrayal." Robert's fists tightened. "Aegar. He was in the south," Ned reminded gently. "But he is king now, by rights." "By rights," Robert echoed, as though tasting the phrase's bitterness. "By rights, Lyanna is my bride." Ned flinched at her name. He had dreamt of her last night. Snow in her hair, blood on face. He could not speak. "If Rhaegar takes the throne," Robert continued, voice low, "will he yield her?" "He may never have held her," Ned said, choosing gentleness over certainty. Robert spun away, scanning lines of tents. The soldiers watched, silent. Rain began. Soft patter. Iron smell rose from ground. "We march," Robert declared at last. "King dead or no, dragon still roams. We break him and his line." He raised the hammer. "For Lyanna." "For Lyanna," the camp answered, though they did not know if she lived. Ned's stomach clenched. He imagined his sister somewhere between battle lines, hunted by fate with no banner overhead. He could not confess his dread to Robert now. Instead, he touched the hilt of ice, murmuring a prayer to old gods that guarded children lost in storm. Far north of them, beyond the neck, Howland Reed stood knee-deep in marsh water with spear poised toward a barbel thrashing reeds. He felt the tremor of hoofbeats through water long before the rider emerged, and his heart thumped faster than any fish. When Lyanna Stark's mare waded through rushes at last, Howland dropped spear entirely. She dismounted stiffly, eyes sunken yet alert. Mud disguised her, drying crimson stains to brown. A raven might overlook her in this color, but not a friend. Howland knelt without words. She touched his shoulder once, gently, as though to confirm he was real. "The king is dead," she whispered, voice more wind than woman. Howland swallowed. "I know," he answered. "Ravens fly each hour." He studied her gray cloak, torn sleeve crusted where bite marks scabbed. "They say lions murdered him, or pyromancers. No raven speaks your name." "Let none," Lyanna said. "Not yet." He nodded, though worry etched lines at his brow. "Your brothers, alive, I pray." She sank to her knees, exhaustion folding limbs. "Howland, the city is powder. Wildfire sleeps beneath it. Rhaegar will ride hard. Robert rides harder." She lifted eyes clouded by days without proper rest. "I can outrun neither war nor truth. But I would see Ned first. Will you guide me?" "You." Howland helped her up, calling soft to a crofter boy who waited with reed boat half dragged onto bank. They loaded mare, saddles, a bundle of cured eel strips. As the boat glided into labyrinthine waterways, Lyanna rested back against barrel staves and let rush stalks veil sky. For the first time in 10 nights, her eyes closed willingly. She dreamed of a weirwood taller than any godsworn tree in Winterfell. Its branches tangled into skies so dense that stars caught like pearls between leaves. Beneath it stood a woman with silver hair and a crown of winter roses. The woman raised one rose, petals dripping frost, and set it on Lyanna's brow. The chill scorched like hot iron. She woke gasping, fingers pressed to forehead. No flower lay there, only sweat. Days blurred in fog-strung marshes. Howland's crannogmen passed them from skiff to skiff, as if she were river cargo too precious for land. They navigated secret narrows, slid under moss-curtained branches where frog song masked splash of oars. At night, they camped on floating islands anchored by ironwood stakes. Fires burned in clay bowls shielded from wet air. Lyanna ate eel soup, tasted salt tears of home in broth. Her wound closed, though arms still ached. Howland brewed paste of marshmallow and mud to draw rot. On the 7th dawn, they reached the solid causeway of Moat Cailin, its basalt towers broken like teeth, gnawed on by time. Northern outriders guarded the causeway now, Tallheart men raising Ned's banner alongside Baratheon's stag. They challenged any traveler, but when Lyanna stepped forward, hood thrown back, the captain dropped to one knee. He sent a rider swift as wind to River Run where Ned's column gathered. Word would run faster than ravens. The wolf maid returns. That evening, Lyanna stood upon cracked battlements of Moat Cailin, staring south over endless ribbon of road. Sunset bled crimson into waterlogged peat, lighting pools like smoldering coals. She pictured armies marching that very line, ironclad feet pounding the stones, and wondered if her act had shortened that march, or doomed it to forever. Her heart beat strange, half hope, half dread. In King's Landing, Jaime Lannister assumed command of the city watch at Varys' suggestion. Gold cloaks respected swords more than scrolls, and Jaime's white cloak drew their obedience like moths to flame. He posted archers atop septy roofs, ringed the alchemist's guild hall with 50 men, and personally descended into vaults, where green candles of wildfire flickered within glass jars. The things whispered, or so it seemed. Each jar held a storm swirling, hungry. Jaime found Lord Chelstead there once, blubbering prayers to the seven before walls streaked luminous glow. "We should flood these tunnels," Jaime told him. Chelstead shook. "Water awakes it. Heat awakes it. Motion awakes it. We have born an unquiet child." Damning a war. Jaime thought of children, Viserys weeping, infant Aegon behind locked doors. And for a moment, he wished to smash each jar regardless. Instead he left, fingers shaking until air touched them. Varys meanwhile drafted scrolls to Highgarden, to Old Town, to Pike. Some bore pleas for allegiance, some threats, draped in courtesy. Yet one letter he penned in cipher, sealed with no sigil, and entrusted to a sellsword faster than crows. "The wolf has returned north. Hawk, watch her trail. Cub waits to howl." The message flew east into Essos upon a fast galley. To whom, no one guessed. But Varys measured every board in the game, even ones beyond the narrow sea. Tywin Lannister learned of Aerys' death 2 days after the Ravenspur crossing. He sat in his solar at Harrenhal, stone gargoyles drooling rain outside, listening as Maester Alfred read. When the Maester finished, Tywin closed his eyes and exhaled once, slow, as though releasing a weight long carried. Then he opened a drawer and produced fresh parchment. "Send word to Kevin," he instructed, voice iron. "We march at sunrise for the capital. Raise every banner. Tell the city the Lion comes to protect the realm." "Nan?" Alfred bowed. "And Prince Rhaegar, my lord." Tywin sat back, gaze unfathomable. "Rhaegar must choose whether to keep his crown or his children. He cannot guard both." In the Riverlands, ravens crossed mid-air, some carrying news of King's death, some carrying news of Robert's victory at Withywood, some carrying darker rumors that the North rode north again because their sister murdered the king, that dragons bled from shadows, that the gods old and new had stirred. Peasants whispered inside barns while crows pecked fields they abandoned. Refugees clogged roads to Seaguard, hoping ships could outrun war. But war followed on every wind. Ned Stark reached Moat Cailin 3 days after Lyanna. He had ridden ahead of Robert's host with 2 guards only, pushing horses until foam crusted saddles. The minute he crossed the causeway, his bannermen bowed him through, and he dismounted, boots splashing in brackish puddles. Lyanna waited upon the battlement. Ned climbed without pause, heart hammering louder than plate boots on stone. He saw her silhouette first, hair blown ragged by gusts off the bog, cloak hood down, posture stiff. Memory slammed him with scenes of childhood. Lyanna racing Benjen across ramparts, Lyanna hiding pups beneath her skirts, Lyanna laughing as snowflakes melted on nose. But this woman's shoulders bore winter heavier. She turned. They said nothing for long breaths. Wind keened through arrow slits. Ned's eyes scanned her face, noting sallow bruises, the healing bite on arm, the hollow beneath cheekbones. He raised gloved hand. She stepped forward, and they embraced, each shaking. When they parted, Ned whispered, "Tell me." She told him. She told of mailshirt hidden in cloak, of the dagger's steel, of Wildfire's green glimmer, of the laugh that was not human. She spoke until voice cracked, and Ned listened without movement, save for the tightening of fists. When she finished, dusk had fallen. Torches below cast wavering ruddy pools. "We will keep this between us," he said, finally. Lyanna's eyes widened. "I will answer for it, Ned. You will answer to me first." His voice shook, but not with anger. "I do not know what judgment Robert will pass, nor Rhaegar, nor Tywin, nor the gods. But I know winter's lessons. Protect Pack, guard truth until ground thaws enough for burial. We must end war before truth is weapon." "You would shield me with falsehood?" she asked. "I would shield the realm from one more fire," Ned said wearily. "Let Robert and Rhaegar fight their battle on Trident. When victory settles, we will speak of Kingslayer and Kinslayer and all shades between. Until then, you are my sister. Alive. That is enough." She did not agree or refuse. She leaned against rampart, staring north where tree-line laced sky. After long silence, she murmured, "Father always said truth is a blade. We may sheathe it, yet sooner or later someone draws." Ned exhaled mist into night. "Then let it be me who holds the hilt." They stood there until stars pinpricked clouds like frosted glass. Below, Howland Reed lit lanterns along the dock where marsh blended into stone. His men murmured of storms to come, but not of war. They knew war already. At dawn, Ned dispatched ravens. To Robert, urging caution. To John Arryn, begging counsel. To Lord Mormont on the wall, warning of wild rumors that might drive Night's Watch deserters south. He kept one raven perched, black eyes gleaming. That bird would carry a letter he could not yet compose, one that named the Wolf Maid, the king's blood on her blade, the wildfire yet to burn. For now it waited, silent as guilt. South of Moat Cailin, Robert's army pressed toward the Trident. Scouts brought news of Lannister banners wheeling east, perhaps for the capital. Robert laughed at that. "Let the lion seize the hill," he told lords, "for the stag will seize the crown." Yet privately he studied horizon as though expecting silver-haired phantom to appear. Each night he walked alone among cookfires, drinking less than before, hammer resting across broad shoulders. On one such walk, he found John Arryn gazing at a map by torch glow. Robert set tankard down. "John," he said, "if I win, if Rhaegar falls, will realm kneel?" Arryn raised tired eyes. "With Aerys dead, many lords search for Lodestar. If you take throne, you must rule, not just win battles." "Then call," Robert grunted. "I only wish to marry Lyanna and go home." Arryn folded the map. "Homes change after wars, Robert." He hesitated. "There is talk she was seen in Crownlands weeks past." Robert's head snapped up. "Alive?" Arryn opened his hands. "Rumor. The kind that breeds where gaps in story yawn. Best not let rumor guide, Hammerhead." Robert nodded, but eyes blazed. Ned's raven had not yet reached him. When it did, it would confirm survival but omit crimson truths. Would that satisfy hunger? In his tent, later, Robert polished helm until starlight shone in steel. Star he would chase until hammer struck dragon or shattered itself in river mud. Weeks slipped. Lyanna recovered in Moat Cailin's healer's tower, ribs knitting, fever breaking under willow bark teas. She walked ramparts at night, hearing wolves howl across bog. Each morning ravens bore tidings. Rhaegar rides through Kingswood, Viserys named heir apparent. If father fails, Tywin reaches Blackwater Rush. Stannis Baratheon holds Storm's End for brother. The board locked pieces into place. Soon one move would decide. Lyanna asked Ned to teach her small clothes weaving, hands restless. He laughed, thinking jest, but brought yarn. She sat by hearth looping thread into knots. Pattern forming wolf chasing dragon across field of winter roses. when hackles pricked. She glanced at doorway, half expecting Jaime Lannister to stride through, sword bared. Yet only Howland entered, bearing a reed flute, playing tune that echoed frogs at dusk. Nights blurred sweeter then, though war loomed. At last scouts raced to mow Kaelin breathless. Rhaegar's vanguard has left King's Landing along the King's Road. Roberts rides north from Antlers. They will meet at the Ford of the Trident under ruby sky. Ned, strapped on armor, kissed sister's brow. "Stay," he commanded. She did not argue, only pressed his gauntlet to her cheek. After they left, Lyanna climbed battlements again. The marsh exhaled mist that climbed her legs like ghost hands. She stared south. A band of will-o'-wisps flickered above reeds, marsh gas or spirits. Nobody knew. She watched them drift, thinking how fire deceives. Wildfire, campfire, ghost fire. Somewhere men would soon clash, steel ringing louder than any lies. She whispered a prayer, for Ned's good sense, for Robert's good heart, for Rhaegar, who once crowned her in roses, for gone to ruin, and for herself, that the blade she drew in darkness would not slice her future when truth unsheathed at last. Thunder rolled beyond horizon, though sky was clear. It sounded too deliberate for storm, a giant's kettle drum announcing war. She turned, cloak snapping, and descended tower stairs to armory where her mail shirt waited. Polished anew, she drew it over chemise and cinched belt. Whether to fight or witness, she did not know. Only that winter's children do not hide when wolves howl. Below, Howland met her at stable door. He did not speak, only handed reins. The mare stamped, sensing tension. Lyanna mounted, inhaled Bog's sharp tang. "Where, my lady?" Howland asked softly. She looked to stars, to the heart of storm. They rode, reeds clattering like spears parted by hooves. Behind them, Moat Caelin's silent towers watched, waiting, as they had always waited, for winter to choose its tale. Pgsql. Dawn seeped over the neck like pale milk poured across bog water, soft and tremulous, touching every reed blade and gray mirror pool, until pearls of light clung there in trembling rows. Lyanna Stark tasted the new morning on her tongue and found it sharp with peat and secrets. For 8 days and nights, she and Howland Reed had threaded southward through a web of half-sunken causeways, each a memory only the Crannogmen kept. Sometimes they pulled skiffs between drowned oaks whose bare branches clutched at mist like skeletal fingers. Other times they rode their ponies single file along spits of firm ground so narrow that the black water lapped at either knee. The marsh seemed endless, yet Howland insisted they made haste. The Trident lay 3 marches south, and rumor galloped faster than any horse. Rhaegar's banners of red and black silks were already unrolling along the riverbanks. Robert's stags marching to meet them beneath a sky thick with thunder-gray cloud. At dusk on the 9th day they emerged from the wet world into the first green fields of the Riverlands proper. There lay an abandoned farmstead. A crooked house of wattle and daub, roof sagging, garden trampled flat by passing host. And here they tethered the ponies beneath an apple tree, stripped bare by hungry soldiers. Lyanna knelt in ash where a forge once stood and felt lingering warmth beneath the soot, as if the iron gods of war still pulsed there. She closed her eyes and listened. Southeast, the wind bore a faint dissonance. Hoofbeats, many of them hammered down to a dull rolling murmur, like stones rattling in a distant cataract. Southwest drifted a deeper sound, heavier, slower. The groaning rumble of wagons, of siege towers perhaps, of baggage drawn by plodding oxen. 2 armies converging, and she, a single thread, pulled tight between. Howland watched her, gray-green eyes reflecting dying light. "If we push hard," he murmured, "we may skirt around their van, ride the Blue Fork west, until we find Lord Hoster's garrisons. Ned will rally there after battle, God's willing." Lyanna rose, brushing ash from hands. "And if the gods are not willing, then the marsh will hide us again." Howland's voice was soft but firm. "Your brother made me swear to keep you safe." She smiled at him, small and wild. "I thank you. But I would see how this ends with my own eyes. I would stand at the world's hinge, Howland, even if only in the shadows. They broke their meager fast on cold oats and a single bruised pear Howland found hidden beneath fallen leaves. Then they rode, steering by starlight until pale dawn unfurled behind them. Every mile south, the land bore fresh scars. Burnt hyrics and churned fields where mailed columns had camped, tree trunks hacked for palisades, small folk huts emptied of everything but smoke-black rafters and the faint, sour smell of fear. Once they overtook 3 ragged women, trudging north with babes strapped to backs. The youngest, no more than 15, carried a blood-stained bundle that might have been a swaddled child or merely a hope already dead. Lyanna dismounted, offered her water skin and the last of the pair. They drank silently, staring at her with eyes gone glassy from too much smoke and turmoil, then shuffled on into the fog. War had swallowed their names the way the marsh swallowed light. By the 12th day, they reached the tumbling flats before the Green Fork. Here banners already rose above hedgerows like strange flowers. The mailed fist of House Glover, the spotted tree of Tall Heart, the crescent-crossed moon of Aerys. Tents sprawled across pasture land in chaotic patchwork. Lyanna felt safety stir in her chest until Howland pointed farther east. There, beyond a stand of willows, she glimpsed tents of creamy silk bordered in Tyrell roses. And farther still, bright golden lions embroidered on scarlet. The lords of the Reach and the Westerlands had come to watch dragons die, or to name a king of their own choosing. They circled wide, sticking to copses and thickets, until the air thickened with the smell of cook fires and latrines, and the restless murmur of 30,000 men at arms. It was late afternoon when they crested a low ridge and beheld the Tumblestone Valley laid out beneath them. The river forked there, green branches flashing silver beneath lowering storm clouds, and at a ford of red-brown stones 2 hosts arrayed themselves, one clad in the black and scarlet of Targaryen lineage, the other in Baratheon black and gold, with pockets of northern gray, veiled blue, Tully red and blue trout. Pennants snapped in a wind gusting hotter than any northern summer. Thunder muttered overhead, yet no rain fell, only a thick humidity that clung to skin like damp cloth. The earth seemed to sweat in anticipation. Lyanna tethered her mare among alders, then crawled on hands and knees until she reached a tumble of mossy boulders overlooking the ford. Howland followed, silent as an otter. They crouched side by side, unseen among crooked stones, as the last maneuvers unfolded. On the northern bank, Robert's vanguard formed, Stormlords in dusky plate, Ned Stark's own household guard in ice-blue cloaks, the bronze-claimed banners of the Vale under Jon Arryn. Robert rode at the fore on a massive black charger, antlers affixed to his helm, warhammer rising and falling as he gestured commands. Even at distance, Lyanna caught the raw vigor that clung to him. He looked a force born from thunder rather than mortal womb. To his right, Ned sat astride a dapple gray, half hidden behind the tall banners, but her heart still leapt. She traced the line of his stance, the way Ice's great hilt jutted above pauldrons etched with dire wool. On the southern bank, Prince Rhaegar assembled his knights. He wore night-black armor inlaid with rubies that drank the afternoon light and shrugged it out again as dusky fire. His helm bore a slender dragon's head wrought in dark steel, wings swept back like blades. Beneath its open visor, his face was pale, almost luminous. Grief nested in the angles of cheek and brow, yet a calm hung about him too, as if sorrow itself had settled into armor. Beside him rode Arthur Dayne of the Kingsguard, Dawn's pale blade across his knees, and Oswell Wynte, Jonathor Derry, Lewin Martell. 5 white cloaks in all. 2 had remained in King's Landing to shield the royal children and viceroys. Even from afar those cloaks gleamed like fresh snow beneath bruised sky. Trumpets blared, thin and keen. Words rippled down the lines in hushed echo. Shields locked, spears angled. The river stones glimmered red beneath shallow water. Trident rubies, folk called them, though they were only local granite polished by centuries of flood. Lyanna's breath caught. She had stood on those very stones as a child, when Lord Rickard brought his brood south to visit Riverrun. She had skipped them across placid pools, laughing as Benjen splashed her. Now warriors would tread there with iron-shod boots, and laughter would drown beneath metal and blood. Robert raised his hammer. A roar lifted behind him, vast, guttural, shaking reeds a mile distant. Across the ford Rhaegar lowered his lance and touched spurs to Destroyer. Drums thudded like a second heartbeat. Then, with a crash that seemed to shake the sky itself, both vanguards surged. The first clash sent spray arcing skyward where hooves struck water. Riders slammed together, shields splintering in showers of painted wood. Spears shattered against plate, and broken shafts hurtled above helmets like javelins cast by unseen giants. Lightning forked beyond the valley, white-hot, answering the clang of bronze and steel. Rain followed at last, fat, warm drops pattering the dust to mud even as men's blood soaked it deeper scarlet. Thunder rolled, but the roar of voices drowned it. War cries screamed to dozens of gods, pleas for mothers, curses flung at heaven and earth alike. Lyanna flinched as if each blow struck her own flesh, yet she could not look away. She tracked Robert by his antler helm. He seemed unstoppable, swinging the great hammer side to side, toppling men like barley before the sight. Once he rose in the saddle and hurled the weapon 2 yards to crush a knight's gorget. In the same motion, he yanked free a mace from saddle hook and kept advancing. Around him, northern bannermen pressed shoulder to shoulder, the loneliest speck of snowflakes in a storm of red and black. But Rhaegar cut through the press with equal dread grace. He unhorsed Lord Felton of Euronwood with a lance tip beneath chin, then drew sword Blackfire, whose dark blade shimmered every time lightning flickered overhead. Wherever he rode, his Kingsguard formed a shining crescent, swords weaving arcs of mirrored rain. Men fell before them, yet they did not revel. Each blow seemed delivered in solemn duty, a funereal rite for bodies already dead. The two champions sighted each other across a chaos of buckling lines. Even at distance, their visors met like paired magnets. Rhaegar wheeled, calling words lost to thunder, and Robert spurred forward, bellowing a name that only Lyanna could hear through memory. And so they rode, carving swaths. Howland muttered prayers in the tongue of Crannog vassals. Lyanna's nails dug moss from stone. She whispered, "Stop them," though she knew no god would. The gap closed. 50 yards, 30, 10. Hooves splashed in tandem. Then impact. Robert's hammer smashed across Rhaegar's left pauldron. Metal burst like fruit struck by mace. Rubies sprayed the river, red droplets spinning in rainwater, so it seemed the stones themselves bled. Rhaegar reeled, but Blackfire swung, carving Robert's gorget opened. Plate dented inward, blood streamed. They circled, breath pluming in steam, each mortal as the other now. Arthur Dayne spurred to aid his prince, yet Ned Stark intercepted, ice ringing against dawn in a flash of winter darkness against morning pale. Two legends collided, their blades a discourse only they could speak. Other duels blossomed, dragon and stag, wolf and sun, moon and lion. The ford became a tapestry of swirling heraldry dumped in mud and torn free again. A Baratheon banner fell, trampled. A dragon banner toppled across it. The two tangled in current and drifted downstream like lovers locked in final embrace. Rain hammered harder until sight blurred. Lyanna wiped water from lids, heart pounding so loud she scarcely heard the war. Robert struck again, smashing Rhaegar's breastplate. The prince's breath burst crimson. Yet he rallied, driving sword into Robert's thigh, twisting clear before the counterblow. They broke apart, circled once more, hooves slogging thigh-deep in reddened sludge. Robert's shoulders heaved. Rhaegar's sword arm shook from the heavy blow. Thunder cracked too near. An oak on the western bank split and toppled, showering sparks of blue lightning flame. The smell of ozone mingled with gore. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. Trumpets fell mute, cries dwindled, even arrows seemed to hover. Lyanna felt time breathe once, deep and mournful. In that breath, she remembered the tournament at Harrenhal. Rhaegar gently placing a crown of roses on her lap. Robert laughing beside her, proud and certain. Two futures diverged that day. Now perhaps they would end. Time exhaled. Robert roared and charged anew, but his injured leg quivered. The hammer swung wide. Slower. Rhaegar stepped inside, Blackfire flashing upward in a perfect cut that sheared through scale at Robert's ribs. The stag reeled, blood spraying. Lyanna's hand flew to mouth, but Rhaegar's blade lodged, stuck between rings. He pulled, bracing. But Robert answered with all the fury of storm upon mountains. He dropped the hammer haft, seized the prince by gorget, and headbutted him full in the visor. Silver rang against steel. Rhaegar's head snapped back. Robert's mailed fist crashed into ruby inset breastplate once, twice. Metal caved, gems shattered. Rhaegar staggered, dropping Blackfire to clatter among stones. For half a breath Lyanna thought Robert would simply bear him down and drown him in the riverbed. But Robert loosed his grip and reached for the hammer again. Rhaegar swayed, half senseless. Arthur Dayne, still locked with Ned, shouted a warning, but wind stole the words. Robert hefted the hammer two-handed and swung with the full might of gods and demons. It caught the prince square in breast, collapsing armor, bones and breath in a single pulped instant. The sound traveled across water like an iron bell rung for judgment. Rhaegar flew backward, arms flailing, ruby armor bursting apart in crimson snow. He landed in Neil, but life had already poured from him unseen. Black blood bubbled on lips. Eyes glazed yet found Robert one last time. Pity, apology, or simple farewell no man could read. Rain caught those last rubies as they slid from bent cuirass into murky tide. One gem bobbed to surface, bright as summer wine, then sank. When Rhaegar toppled onto his side, the ford grew suddenly silent, save for splashing and the hiss of falling rain upon hot steel. A moment held. Then thousands of throats unleashed chaos. Dragon knights cried out in horror. Robert's host roared triumph so fierce the clouds seemed to shudder. Yet, for Lyanna, nothing moved. She stared at the river, where rubies drifted like scattered rose petals. All at once, every story she had ever known felt small. Songs of brave princes, of burning kings, of stolen maidens. None could contain the stark enormity of a single heartbeat ended. She might have knelt there until night, but the living war found her ears again. Rhaegar's fall threw the Targaryen line into panic. Ser Jonathor rallied a shield wall to guard the prince's body, but it buckled under a tide of Northmen howling for vengeance. Luwin Martell fell to Lord Harlan Glover's axe. Oswell went stallion reared when an Arryn spear pierced its flank, and both horse and rider crashed among the stones. Arthur Dayne disengaged from Ned in a flash of white fury, shouldered through armored ranks, and lifted Rhaegar's limp form across his saddle with the strength of grief. He spurred away, two remaining white cloaks at flanks, carving path toward the southern bank where Tyrell infantry still held line. Behind them, the royal host faltered and broke. Knights fled upstream seeking shallow crossings. Others hurled down sigils to blend into chaos. Some turned swords on themselves rather than taste Robert's wrath. Howland shook Lyanna's shoulder. "We must move," he urged, voice trembling. "The field is lost for dragon banners, yet danger is greater now. Come." She rose, legs unsteady. Her gaze found Robert again, bloody, mule-kicked, yet unbowed, standing knee-deep in Scarlet River with hammer raised like a lightning rod. All around him voices chanted his name, pounding the syllables into storm beat. She thought to call out, yet words died. She and Robert were parted by more than water. Deeds, secrets, and coming reckonings built walls wider than the trident. They retreated down the slope, leading ponies into alder gloom. But even woods shook with victory shouts, and riders roamed, drunk on blood, seeking spoil. Twice they hid under nettle briars while foragers passed. Lyanna pressed hand to dagger hilt, ready to kill again if forced. Rain washed grime from her face in rivulets that tasted like tears. At dusk, they reached a burned sept overlooking a tributary creek. Here they paused to water ponies. Lyanna knelt at creek's edge, staring at reflection fractured by rain ringlets. She had slain a king. Robert had slain a prince. 2 strokes had ended a dynasty older than both. Yet war's fire kept smoldering. Tywin marched on King's Landing, the Reachmen still encamped. Dorne would thirst for Luwin's blood price. No single blade truly ends conflict. It only carves channels for new wrath to flow. Howland crouched beside her. "We should turn north," he whispered. Ned will follow once Robert crowns. The trident is no place for you now. Lyanna touched water, sending rings outward. Every place is for me now, or no place. Whichever the gods decide. Night crept in like ink spilled on parchment. They lit no fire, yet in far distance they saw glow of hundreds, victor camps feasting beneath sudden clear sky. The rain ceased and stars peeked, timid, as though ashamed to witness such revel. Lyanna lay beneath a shattered window arch, cloak damp, listening to frogs. Sleep came but twisted. She dreamt again of a woman crowned in roses, yet this time the woman lay in water, petals drifting from silver hair. Eyes like twin moons staring blind. She woke before dawn, heart galloping. Howland slept cross-legged, reed spear cradled, eyes half open even in slumber. She rose and paced the ruined nave. Cracked stone beneath her feet bore faint fresco of the mother's hand outstretched. She wondered if that hand once blessed infants, weddings, harvests. Now it blessed nothing but ghosts. Before sunrise riders approached, the clatter of hooves distinct from pillagers, heavier, disciplined. Lyanna drew blade. Howland sprang to crouch, but a voice rang soft through trees. "Lady Lyanna? Lyanna Stark, are you there?" It was Benjen. He rode with 4 Winterfell outriders cloaked in gray-trimmed black. Lyanna stepped from doorway, relief flooding quicker than nerves. Benjen slid down, helm under arm, hair soaked in sweat and stormwater. He folded her into fierce embrace near crushing ribs, then held her at arm's length, eyes shining. "Ned lives," he said. "Robert too. The prince fell. The battle's done." "I saw," Lyanna answered. Benjen's gaze flicked to Howland. "We feared you'd gone to the city. Maesters claimed assassins stalked Aerys. Some even say." Lyanna pressed fingers to his lips. Later, it came out harsher than meant. "Take us to Ned." Benjen nodded, accepting unspoken weight. They mounted, turning northwest toward River Run, where Lord Hoster's banners still flew above towers, shining with new sun. Columns of wounded wove same road. Men with shattered arms, women pulling carts of groaning soldiers. Chained prisoners marched under errant guards. The air reeked of wet metal and boiled barley. The road rang with sobs and songs both, all jumbled. At River Run's western meadow, Ned waited in field tent, his mail still spattered though armor removed. Gray wind flicked open the flap as Benjen announced return. Ned stood. Circles beneath his eyes had grown darker, but when he saw Lyanna he broke into a rare bright smile that fractured at edges. They embraced long, neither spoke of death or daggers, only of coming home. Later, as dusk bled crimson along horizon like the river's echo, Ned called council. Lord Blackwood, Sir Roderick Castle, Howland, Lyanna. Outside, horns brayed triumph. Inside, quiet reigned. "Robert rides on King's Landing," Ned began, voice rough. "Lord Tywin entered the city 2 days past. Throne gates open by Aerys. Some say he means to claim crown for Joffrey, rumored bastard by his daughter and the prince. Others think he will offer fealty to Robert once dragons fall. Either way, the city is in peril. Wildfire stores lie beneath sept and guilds. Lord Chelstead tried to burn the caches, but Jaime Lannister's guards overpowered him. Chelstead died. Throat slit or self-inflicted, no one knows. Blind." Lyanna tensed. Ned's glance held warning but moved on. "Robert needs legitimacy. Tetaside, no. He means to wed Cersei for her father's support. I argued your claim, Lyanna, yet Robert thinks you dead or lost. Rumors swirl you fled with the prince. He will not speak your name until Iron Throne is won." Ned hammer. Silence dropped like a blade. Lyanna exhaled slowly. Howland's eyes met hers, solemn. "Let him wed the lioness then," she said at last, each word scraping. "I have blood enough upon hands without adding civil strife." Ned started. "You accept that? Do I have choice?" Her laugh was brittle. "The realm would tear apart if I stand between Robert and Tywin now. Aerys' fire still smolders under those streets. One wrong spark and tens of thousands die. I will not be that spark. And no. Benjen swore under breath. Howland placed rough fingers on her wrist, steadying. Ned spoke again. There is more. Prince Viserys and the infant Aegon remain in Maegor's holdfast, guarded by Sir Meryn and Qyburn sellswords. If Tywin turns cloak fully, the children may perish. Robert's fury is great. He will brook no dragon spawn. And what of Rhaegar's sister? Lyanna asked. Elia. Rumor says she still lives, but weak. Tywin holds her fate. Ned's jaw tightened. I ride tonight with a small force to reach the city ahead of Robert, to forestall slaughter if I can. Lyanna stepped forward. Then I ride too. No. The word cracked across canvas dirty. Ned met her gaze unflinching. Your presence will complicate matters. If Tywin learns Stark steel slew his king, he already suspects Lannister steel did. She cut. Lyanna. His voice gentled. Stay at River Run. Let me do this. She saw plea beneath command. Father's stern line of honor moved his mouth. Mother's quiet caution shadowed his eyes. She nodded once. The will fought assent. Ned exhaled. Relief and dread mingled. The council broke. Torches flickered outside, sparks swirling like fireflies. Lyanna walked ramparts of River Run, listening to Tully guards joke, watching the last rays gild water where the Red Fork met Tumblestone. She thought of rubies again, glinting in silt. Some scavenger would find them and forge new legend. All stories birthed children. She found Howland by Riverside, mending spear lashings. Will you stay? She asked, or return north? He did not look up. I swore reeds to winter wolves. Where you walk, my oaths follow. She sank beside him, dipping toes in dark water. Night insects chirred like distant blacksmiths. You know my weight, she whispered. Truth will surface. Robert will learn. Ned will stand between, but even a wolf's heart may snap beneath such strain. Howland tied a knot, pulled fast. Truth is arrow in flight. You may guide it early, or let it land where it will. Choose when to speak. That is all any of us own. She leaned against his shoulder, the touch grounding. Stars wheeled overhead, heedless of kings and killers. 3 days later, Ned departed with 100 horse and the raven-sealed letter for Robert's hand. Benjen rode with him, sworn to deliver a second scroll to Jon Arryn. Lyanna watched them vanish through morning mist, a knot twisting in gut. Would they reach gates before lion banners sealed them? Would fire hands bury city first? Waiting gnawed like hunger. She trained with Sir Roderick, hacking pine posts until arms shook. She walked parapets at midnight. She helped River Run's healers tend wounded shipped upriver. In the Invalids' Hall, she met Lord John Connington, half-conscious with fever, wounds festered by river water. He babbled of Rhaegar, of loyal oaths, of rubies stolen. She pressed cool cloth to brow, and he called her Lady of Sorrows without knowing name. She left tears upon pillow. News came piecemeal. Robert crowned in Shorten encampment. Tywin opened city. Lannister soldiers sacked wealthy manors but spared small folk. Jaime Lannister presented the Iron Throne to Robert, blood still flaking on white cloak. The royal children, tales conflicted. Some claimed throne from Tower, others hidden by Varys, others spirited to Dragonstone. Ned arrived too late to save Elia. Her body found in Maegor's bedchamber, cradling shattered infant. Silence fell over River Run when Raven cawed such tidings. Lyanna walked to Godswood and screamed until voice broke. That night she unsheathed the dagger, the simple castle-forged blade that ended madness, and carried it to the Godswood. Beneath tangled heart-tree roots she dug with bare hands, nails tearing. She laid blade in damp earth, whispering names. Rickard, Brandon, Elia, Rhaegar, unnamed babes. She covered steel with soil and wept. But memory's weight did not lighten. Soil cannot bury ghosts. Winter's first chill touched air by the time Ned returned to River Run. He found his sister atop battlements, hair whipping. She braced as he approached. The city is Robert's, he said simply. The realm kneels. At what cost? He flinched. Too high. She waited. He swallowed. Elia is gone. The children... Words faltered. Robert named Tywin hand. Dead. Weddings are planned. Much still to mend. Bad and me. And you? She asked. I ride north to Moat Cailin, he answered. Then home. Winterfell needs its lord. She searched his eyes for censure. None lay there, only exhaustion. Me. You ride with me, he said. Behind us lies ash, ahead snow. We will build anew. She blinked, tears prickling but unshed. Robert will ask. Robert must heed realm before vengeance. When he is ready for truths, you will share them. He touched her cheek. Until then, you are Lyanna Stark, sister of the North, oath-bound to no crown. She nodded. They turned north. Their homeward journey passed through silent fields where winter wheat sprouted pale, through villages rebuilding burnt thatch, through the neck where reeds blushed gold. Small folk bowed as they passed, hailing a king they did not see, praising heroes who felt no triumph. Lyanna wore plain wool, hood up, brown as marsh sparrow. Each night she tasted air colder, crisper. It smelled of coming snow. At Moat Cailin, Ned lingered to muster new garrison. Lyanna wandered crumbling towers, counting crows roosting. She found the stone where she and Ned first spoke after Aerys' death. Lichen covered half his etched initials. She traced them softly. Perhaps time does bury after all. Days later, Winterfell's gray walls rose, haloed by dusk. Torches lined battlements like greeting stars. Maester Wales, pale with age, rang the great bell. Dogs howled welcome. Lyanna crossed bridge above steaming hot springs and felt warmth bleed upward into frozen souls. Within gate, she dismounted, pressing palm to rough granite. She knelt in Godswood before the ancient weirwood whose face wept ruby sap. Snow dusted branches. She whispered apologies, confessions, oaths. The heart tree listened, its silence wide as winter sky. That night feast fires blazed in great hall, yet Lyanna slipped away to crypts. Torches flickered along descending tunnel. Shadows danced across stone kings with iron swords across laps. She approached her father's effigy, candles guttering. Rickard Stark's likeness looked stern, but mouth seemed softer in low light. She knelt, pressing brow to cold stone. I avenged you, she breathed, but I did not mend you. Tears dripped. Teach me how to build from ashes. No answer. Only dripping water and dark. She stood, wiped face, and climbed from tomb. Over the next moons, Winterfell settled into rhythm. Harvest wagons rattled in, granaries filled. Snow fell, thick and soft, hushing scars of summer war. Ned sent ravens south, offering grain to famine-struck crownlands. He received in return a royal decree, naming him Warden of the North, friend to king. Robert's letters brimmed with boisterous affection, yet skirted mention of Lyanna. Each scroll smelled faintly of wine and lion perfume. Lyanna trained daily with Sir Roderick, sparred Benjen, hunted elk in Wolfswood. Yet sometimes she woke before dawn, pulse racing, hearing echoes of wildfire crack or prince's armor shatter. She would walk ramparts until sun painted snow pink. Life moved, but memory refused stillness. On the last eve before midwinter, Ned found her pacing frost-slick courtyard. He carried wool cloak, trimmed in white fur. A gift, he said, draping it across her shoulders. She stroked fur absently. From Robert, she guessed. From me. But his courier bore it. She glanced down. No sigil marred fabric, only plain gray, soft and warm. Relief bloomed. Thank you. Ned studied her. Spring will come, he said quietly. When snows recede, we may ride south for coronation feast. If you wish. She considered long. Perhaps. By then, truths may weigh less. He nodded. By then. Snowflakes twirled, catching lamplight. Lyanna looked up at swirling white. A year ago, she had danced beneath falling petals of blue winter roses, each petal a promise unkept. Now snow drifted, silent but sure. Erasing tracks, softening edges, She breathed deep. Cold, seared lungs yet carried promise. In spring the pack would howl anew. Inside, hearth fires crackled. Outside, night wolves sang. Lyanna turned toward Hall, cloak swaying. With each step she felt the dagger's ghost lighten, though its echo would never leave. Some blades remained buried not under earth but within heart, reminding bearer they had once cut fate. She paused at doorway, glancing skyward. Cloud parted, revealing the hunter's moon white and full. She raised chin. "Watch, father," she murmured. "I will guard them now." Then she entered Winterfell's warmth, letting heavy oaken door thud shut behind, and the wind carried her vow across ramparts like a wolf's low growl. Quiet, resolved, and enduring. Wah, Kai. Winter deepened its hold on Winterfell, turning the stone keep and its sprawling outbuildings into islands, adrift in a sea of white. Snow gathered on the ramparts and blanketed the godswood until even the heart trees' crimson leaves seemed mere flecks in a vast drift. The air tasted clean and sharp, alive with the scent of pine and wood smoke. Lyanna Stark moved through it like a pale shadow, swaddled in her new cloak, the fur hood framing her face, eyes the color of storm clouds. Time passed, the wound of war receding from the surface of daily life, though never vanishing entirely. Ravens still came, their wings dusted with ice, bearing news from the far ends of the realm. Ned received reports in the solar with the calm of one who had learned, too young, that peace was not the absence of threat, but the careful balancing of unspoken debts. Benjen rode the perimeters of the winter towns, finding small folk whose homes had collapsed beneath snow, sharing salted pork and grain, promising that the wolves watched over their own. Servants bustled through halls, voices bright with gossip of southern pageants and Queen Cersei's infamous beauty, of the tournaments planned for the next spring, of a king's laughter that no longer hid the edge of mourning. Lyanna listened to all these tales, weighing them like pebbles in her palm. She became once more a presence in Winterfell, but never again quite the girl who danced with a wooden sword or chased Benjen through apple orchards. The old Lyanna was a ghost in her own bones, restless but unseen. Each morning, she joined the guard at sword practice, trading blows with Sir Roderick, or sparring Benjen until breath misted and muscles burned. She rode out with the hunts, chasing stag or wolf through frost-rimed brush, her laughter coming low and rare, but bright as fire in the deep of night. Some days she helped old Nan in the kitchens, slicing root vegetables with swift hands, or walked the ramparts with Ned, discussing the management of stores, the apportioning of winter grain, the grumblings of distant bannermen who'd lost too many sons at the Trident. Ned had become harder in some ways, his eyes slower to crinkle with amusement, his voice more careful, even with her. Yet he trusted her judgment, leaning on her memory of lordly faces and her sense of what words might soothe pride or fan old enmity. "I'll need you beside me, Lyanna," he confessed one evening, sharing a cup of mulled wine as snow fell beyond the arrow slit. "If the king rides north, we must appear united before every eye. You understand how little it would take to set the lords to whispering. I will not have the north divided for want of candor between kin." "Nain," she nodded, understanding more than she wished to say. "You have my word, Ned. And when Robert comes," he ventured, searching her face, "will you speak to him? There's nothing to be gained by silence now, though it needn't all be told at once." She stared at the embers, the memory of a crown of blue roses stirring bitterly in her chest. "I will speak with him. But some truths, Ned. Some are best left to the gods for now. I have buried what needs burying. The rest will come in its own time." "Nindo." He squeezed her hand, neither pressing nor withdrawing, and they watched the snow fall together in companionable quiet. Word reached them in the third month of winter's rule. The king's progress would ride at first thaw. A dozen letters confirmed it, each stamped with the royal seal, each worded in the flowery style of Grand Maester Pycelle, but containing Cersei's hand as well. Robert would travel north with his new queen, the Lannister twins, a retinue of lords and ladies hungry for northern novelty. And with him would come the small council. Jon Arryn Varys, Littlefinger, Renly Baratheon, and a score of knights. It would be the first visit of a crowned king to Winterfell since the conquest. The castle erupted in activity, Hedges were cut back from the guest house. Kitchens smoked day and night as geese were plucked, and barrels of southern wine rolled from cellars. The heart tree in the godswood was scrubbed and garlanded with holly. Servants scurried to replace moth-eaten tapestries. Even Benjen, for all his gruffness, gave in to the chaos, polishing his boots and grumbling about how knights from Lannisport would whine about every drap. Lyanna moved through the preparations with a sense of detachment, as though watching her life from the other side of frosted glass. The king's coming meant reckoning, a meeting with Robert she could not forestall, the certainty that secrets left to rot in darkness might yet sprout teeth. She did not dread Robert himself. Her affection for him was real, if not the fever-bright love he had once hoped for. But she feared the questions in his eyes, the ache of disappointment, the old wound that her flight to King's Landing and her bloody deed had carved between them. The snows melted in a single fortnight of unseasonable warmth. Mud lapped the base of Winterfell's walls, and green showed beneath the brown thatch. On the morning the king's party was expected, Lyanna donned her gray cloak and simple dress of winter blue, fastening the wolf's head brooch at her throat. She braided her hair with a single blue ribbon, as if in defiance of fate, and stood on the battlements beside Ned and Benjen as the royal procession wound its way up the King's Road. They saw the banners first. A sea of gold and black, crimson lions, the stags of Baratheon rampant against the green of spring. The king himself rode at the head, still broad of chest, though the years had thickened him, and his beard showed streaks of gray. His laughter carried on the wind, booming, unashamed, as he called for more speed, and threatened to race his bannermen to the gates. At his side rode Queen Cersei, regal and aloof, her golden hair bound in a net of pearls, eyes cool as glass. Beside her, the Lannister twins, Sir Jaime resplendent in white and gold, his sister in a gown that caught the sun with every step. When the king's party entered the yard, Ned descended to greet them, cloak swirling behind. Benjen and Lyanna followed, boots crunching on gravel. Robert swept Ned into an embrace that nearly crushed ribs, clapping him on the back and roaring for all to hear. "Winterfell! I've missed you, Ned. Gods, I've missed the cold." Then there. When he turned to Lyanna, the yard fell silent. The years had changed her. She was no longer the coltish girl who rode like the wind or giggled at Benjen's jests. She was taller now, and her eyes held depths only those who'd crossed fire and death could truly recognize. Robert's expression flickered between joy and something more complicated: pain, longing, the memory of what was lost. "Lyanna," he said, voice lower, almost hoarse. "You're a sight I thought never to see again." She smiled. Small, sad, but genuine. "Welcome to Winterfell, Your Grace." He opened his arms. Uncertain. She stepped into them, allowing his embrace, feeling the tension in his muscles, the years of absence and the things unsaid. When they parted, she saw tears in his eyes, quickly masked by laughter. "Will you ride with me in the Godswood, Lyanna?" he asked loud enough for all to hear. "I have so many things to tell you." She nodded, and they left the others to wander beneath the red leaves. Benjen winked, then trailed after the Lannister guards to ensure nothing was amiss. Ned returned to his duties as host, managing the swirl of southern nobles with a watchful eye. In the hush of the Godswood, Robert walked beside her, boots squelching in soft earth. For a long while, neither spoke. The trees listened, the heart tree's face looming pale in the shade. "Do you remember," Robert said at last, "how you told me I was too loud to hunt rabbits? That I'd scare every deer from Winterfell to White Harbor?" She smiled, warmth rising unbidden. "I remember you proving me right. You've never crept anywhere in your life." He chuckled, then sobered. "Lyanna, I looked for you. When word reached me you'd vanished, I tore half the realm apart. I would have traded my soul to find you." Her fingers curled around a trailing holly branch. "I know, Robert. I know what you risked for me. But things were never so simple as we wished them." His gaze was searching. "And after the war? I wrote you. You never answered." She turned, eyes searching his. "Because I did not know what to say. There was too much blood between us. Yours, mine, The kings and the realm needed peace more than it needed old wounds torn open. His jaw clenched. "You were always braver than I, or wiser." She laughed softly. "I doubt that. I simply survived." He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "There is nothing I would not give for what might have been, Lyanna. But I see you, as you are, and I am glad. Even if—" He broke off, looking down. "Even if the world had other plans." She squeezed his fingers. "Thank you for not asking what you cannot bear to hear, Robert. There are truths I owe you, but not today. Let us have this moment at least." He nodded, voice rough. "For you, anything." They walked together, memories old and new threading between them like sunlight through the boughs. When they returned to the yard, Lyanna felt a strange peace, unfinished, raw but present. That evening, the feast in the great hall blazed with light. The southern lords toasted Ned, praised Winterfell's ale, mocked the bitter cold. Queen Cersei presided in icy elegance, trading barbs with Sansa and Arya, who had joined the table for the first time, eyes wide at so much finery. Jaime Lannister watched the crowd with feline indolence, always half smiling, always alert. Lyanna sat between Benjen and Lord Manderley, exchanging stories of the Trident and the northern fields. She met every gaze steadily, feeling at once exposed and armored by all she had endured. Robert drank deep, sometimes laughing, sometimes silent, his eyes often seeking her across the room. Ned kept the wine flowing and the tempers cool, quietly intervening when old wounds threatened to flare anew. Days passed in a whirl of hunting parties, pageants, and quiet councils. Robert visited the crypts with Ned and Lyanna, paying respects to Rickard and Brandon. In the candlelit gloom, Robert wept openly, grief for old friends spilling through the cracks of kingly armor. One afternoon, as snows melted from the highest roofs and ravens wheeled in clear blue sky, Robert asked Lyanna to ride with him to the ridge above the Wolf's Wood. They rode in silence for a time, letting the wind and the hush of awakening earth speak for them. "Lyanna," Robert said quietly as they reined in on the hilltop, "when you vanished, when word reached me of what had happened in King's Landing, I blamed everyone. Rhaegar, Aerys, even Ned. But never you. Never you. I wanted to bring you home, to make you my queen. I wanted to erase everything that had gone wrong. But I was too late. Nemesis." She looked away, watching sunlight break on distant ice. "No one could have foreseen what happened, Robert. Not you. Not me. The world was already breaking." He swallowed. "Tell me, was it worth it? Killing Aerys?" She closed her eyes, heart pounding. "I ask myself that every day. But if I had not, thousands might have burned. You saw what he did to my father and Brandon. What he would have done to King's Landing." He nodded. Slow. "Some say it was the Lannisters. Some the gods. You will always have my silence if you want it. Listen." She met his gaze, tears trembling in her voice. "Thank you." They lingered on the ridge until the wind grew sharp. On the ride home, Robert spoke of the South, of his growing son, of a kingdom slowly healing. They parted at the gate, understanding passing between them that needed no words. Spring bloomed at last, pushing green shoots through snow and drawing wild geese home. Across northern skies, the king and his party departed with much fanfare, banners snapping, trumpets sounding. Robert clasped Ned and Benjen in fierce embrace, pressing Lyanna's hand one final time. "Write to me, wolf girl," he said with a sad smile, "or I'll come north and drag you to court myself." "I promise," she answered, meaning it. With the king's party gone, Winterfell quieted. Days stretched in gentle routine, tending to the keep, training with the guard, walking the godswood, riding beneath a sky fat with new clouds. Lyanna began writing letters. To Robert, to old friends in the south, to the small folk of the shattered riverlands, whose lives she'd brushed only briefly. She taught Arya how to track wolf prints through dew, and showed Sansa the secret rooms behind the kitchens, where as a girl she'd hidden with stolen tarts. Yet the past could not remain wholly buried. Word came from King's Landing that new plots were afoot. Varys wrote, obliquely, of seeds planted in wild earth, while Littlefinger's letters arrived scented and insincere, hinting at old debts, new opportunities. Ned's brow grew heavier with worry, the shadows beneath his eyes deepening as rumors of unrest in the Westerlands and Reach found their way north. Queen Cersei sent gifts for the coming summer, but her notes, polite, carried a cold undertone. One stormy night, as thunder shook the windows and rain hammered the walls, Ned called Lyanna to the solar. By firelight, he unrolled a sealed letter bearing the hand's sigil. "It's from Jon Arryn," Ned said. "He warns that old loyalties are shifting. Some say the Targaryen children survived, hidden by loyalists. Others whisper that Dorne is stirring." Lyanna listened, her own secrets pressing like a second heart against her ribs. "What will you do?" He sighed. "For now, nothing. The North will not be first to break peace. But I would have you keep watch, Lyanna. If anything comes, if any face from the past returns, tell me first." "Then again." She nodded, gripping his hand. "Always." Seasons turned. The northern fields bloomed, crops sprouting. Small folk planted, harvested, celebrated. In late summer, Ned rode to White Harbor for a gathering of lords, leaving Lyanna to hold Winterfell. She did so with calm competence, listening to grievances, settling disputes, and commanding respect in a way few ladies could. She patrolled the walls, watched the guards drill, and dined with the household, stories and laughter returning to her in fits and starts. One morning, as she rode alone beyond the walls, she found herself at the edge of a pond, reeds brushing her boots. Dragonflies danced in the sun, and a lone heron watched her from the far bank. She closed her eyes, listening to wind and water, and for the first time in many months, she felt peace. Not the hollow silence of exhaustion, but the true quiet that follows storms weathered and survived. Later that day, a raven arrived with news of Dorne. Prince Doran Martell sent greetings and a gift of golden oranges, along with a veiled promise of unfading friendship. Lyanna smiled, remembering Elia's kindness and Luwin's laughter, and wrote a careful reply that offered sympathy and hope. Some wounds would never close, but she could tend them with words, if not with deeds. As autumn came, Benjen prepared to join the Night's Watch. On his last night, he and Lyanna sat atop the east tower, legs dangling over the parapet. They drank spiced wine and watched the stars turn. "I thought I'd see the world," Benjen mused, "but I never expected it to be like this. So much blood, so much sorrow." She nudged him with her shoulder. "You'll see other things too. Beauty, honor, loyalty. You'll bring the North with you wherever you go." He smiled, half grief, half joy. "And you? What will you do, Lyanna?" She gazed over the moonlit snows. "Live. Watch over Ned and Winterfell and all our people. I will not run again, Benjen. My place is here." He kissed her brow. "Keep the fires burning, little wolf." When he was gone, Lyanna sat long in the chill, watching for dawn. In the months that followed, peace held. But the North remained wary. Travelers brought tales of unrest in the Reach, of ships sailing under the Red Kraken, of Dothraki in the Far East. At night, Lyanna dreamed of fire and blood, of a king's dying scream, of rubies sinking into the trident, and sometimes, rarely, of blue roses scattered on white snow. Yet in waking she found solace in her home. She watched children race in the yard, taught Arya to ride, helped Sansa tend gardens, told Bran and Rickon stories of wolf packs and secret caves. She listened to the old songs at feasts, sang with her kin, and when Ned returned from his journeys, she met him at the gate with a smile. One evening, as the first true frost of winter crept in, Ned stood beside her on the ramparts. The sky was alive with stars. "Do you regret it?" he asked, voice low. "Any of it?" She thought for a long time. "I regret the pain, but not the choice. I did what I had to. For you, for the North, for all of us." "Now," he nodded, silent. "You saved more lives than you know, Lyanna. Whatever else, remember that." She rested her head on his shoulder. "And you, brother, have saved me." The wind howled, cold and wild, but inside the walls of Winterfell, Lyanna Stark stood unafraid. Her story was not the one sung in ballads or whispered in southern courts. It was one of sorrow and survival, of a blade drawn in darkness, and a life rebuilt from ashes. It was a story of winter, yes, but also of the spring that always followed. And so she lived, guarding the North, keeping faith with family and honor, letting the past become a memory, and the future her own. The end. Summer followed that winter with unusual strength, days swelling golden and long across the fields of the North. The white snows receded, and the world revealed its scars and its plenty. Lyanna Stark moved through the halls of Winterfell with new purpose, her presence steadying for the household, her touch gentle with the children, who looked to her as a second mother. Ned ruled wisely, aided by her quiet counsel and sharp eye for both men and motives. Rumors of unrest drifted in on warm breezes. In the south, Lannister gold glittered in the hands of restless lords, and songs were sung of dead kings and broken dragons. Sometimes at supper, a traveling bard would strum a harp and sing verses of the Wolf Maid, who slew the Mad King, his tune bold in the common rooms and subtle at noble tables. Lyanna listened in silence, face unreadable, and the room would fall silent too, uncertain whether to believe the myth that hid in plain sight. Children flourished under her care. Arya clung to Lyanna's side, learning to throw a knife, to ride with knees light as a shadow cat on her pony's flanks, to slip in and out of the kitchens for sweet cakes without rousing the scullions. Sansa sat at Lyanna's knee, asking questions about southern courts, about the color of the Dornish sky, about the truth of dragonfire. Lyanna answered with patient honesty, shaping her words to each girl's hunger for the world. Robb followed Ned everywhere, eager, restless, practicing swordplay with Benjen or Sir Roderick. Bran scrambled after his siblings, small and stubborn, and Rickon babbled as he learned to walk, tiny hands clinging to Lyanna's finger as she steadied his first steps on the stone floor of the Great Hall. Benjen's letters arrived from the wall, often smudged with soot and wolf fur. He wrote of wildlings, of ravens, of the lonely chill of the far north. He missed them all, he said, but found a strange comfort in the endless wind and the fierce brotherhood of the Night's Watch. Lyanna read these letters aloud to the children, letting them imagine their uncle as a bold ranger, a dark shape against the snow. The seasons worked their slow alchemy. Lyanna learned the rhythm of the keep, the thousand small decisions that kept the North thriving, when to order the marsh hay cut, which farmers to trust with seed grain, how to settle a quarrel between feuding bannermen. She met with lords in the solar, weighing each word as if it were gold. Some tried to test her, recalling old gossip about the Wolf Maid's wildness, but she met each challenge with measured calm, the echo of steel in her voice. Ned trusted her implicitly. In the deep hours after feasts, he would join her in the Godswood, watching moonlight tangle in the branches of the heart tree, speaking quietly of his worries. "The king's hand grows heavier each year," he confided once, "and the realm forgets what it owes to the North. We must hold fast, Lyanna. Promise me, if the day comes I cannot shield you all, you will stand as I would." "Namen, obeys away. That's a level," she promised and meant it with every sinew. In King's Landing, meanwhile, Robert Baratheon's reign ripened and soured in turns. The southern lords quarreled over trade and tribute. The Lannisters grew in power, their gold buying new friends, their reach stretching like the shadow of a lion over every council table. Queen Cersei ruled her court with a jeweled fist, smiling, calculating, her eyes never far from her own children. Rumors of Targaryen heirs in exile surfaced and faded. Varys sent cryptic birds north, warning Ned of shifting winds. Robert wrote less often as the years turned. His letters lost their raw longing, replaced by jokes, old hunting tales, complaints about Cersei, or the burdens of rule. Lyanna saw the struggle in his handwriting, the pressure of a life not chosen but thrust upon him. She answered with kindness, stories of the North, gentle chiding to lay down his cup, and once a single blue rose pressed between the pages. Life at Winterfell was not without sorrow. Old Nan passed one autumn night, her tales scattering like leaves in the wind. Maester Wally's faded, his mind wandering far from the rookery. Lyanna sat with him in his last days, reading to him from the yellowed scrolls he loved. listening to his memories of ancient kings and wild, vanished winters. When he died, the bells tolled, and the household mourned in true northern fashion, by lighting fires and singing the old songs beneath the snow. Arya was the first to notice the shadows. "Who are they?" she whispered to Lyanna one dusk, as the two watched strange men ride in from the south, their cloaks trimmed in gold. "They look at you as if they know secrets." Lyanna watched the men. Spies, perhaps, or mere agents for the Lannisters, blend with the crowd. "All men carry secrets, little wolf," she murmured. "It is how they are used that matters." Sansa feared them, clinging to her sister and watching each meal for signs of poison, each visitor for some slight against their house. Lyanna reassured her with gentle words, teaching her the art of reading faces, the power of silence, the shield of courtesy. The quiet was broken late one autumn by the arrival of a raven carrying a message marked in the crimson wax of House Martell. The letter was from Prince Doran, who wrote of a plot uncovered in Old Town. A merchant prince claiming descent from Rhaegar, gathering swords in the free cities. Doran sought counsel, offering alliance in patience, if not in arms. Ned called a council. Lyanna, Sir Roderick, Lord Manderley and Howland Reed, now settled again in the neck, gathered in the solar, voices hushed. "We cannot war for every rumor," said Lord Manderley. "The North has no men to spare for Essos. But if dragons return," Howland mused, "the South will look to us for strength." Lyanna said nothing at first. Then, quietly, "We must listen, watch, and keep the peace within our own walls. If the time comes, we will choose as the old kings did, by what is right, not what is convenient." Ned nodded, pride and worry mingling in his gaze. The first true test of this resolve came the following spring, when a wounded rider appeared at the Winterfell gate, blood caking his leathers. He carried a torn piece of Targaryen, red and black, and the sigil of a crowned stag. Ned brought him to the solar, Lyanna at his side. The man, half delirious, stammered a warning. "There is a fire rising in the east. Ships, hundreds of them, seen off the stepstones. A boy with silver hair calls himself Aegon. The Golden Company rides with him." Ned dismissed all but Lyanna. "It begins again," he said. She touched his arm. "We will hold, Ned. The North remembers." Then Nani. Ravens flew that night, each letter a thread in a web spun across kingdoms. Warnings to Robert, to the Eyrie, to White Harbor. Lyanna penned her own to Prince Doran. "The North stands ready, but our swords are not for sale. Send us truth, and we will answer with honor." The days grew tense. Sansa and Arya argued. Robb drilled harder than ever, young and restless, eager to prove himself. Bran asked endless questions about dragons, while Rickon drew silver-haired knights on the slate tiles in the old kitchens. The mood in the hall sharpened, every eye turning south, every ear listening for distant thunder. Robert arrived unannounced, weeks ahead of his retinue, riding hard with only Sir Barristan and 3 other knights. He looked older, grayer, his laugh brittle as the morning frost. He hugged Ned and clapped Robb's shoulder, but his eyes found Lyanna first. "Have you heard, Wolf Girl?" he asked her quietly as they walked the Godswood, their steps muffled in moss. "Aegon reborn, or so they say. He'll want what I have." She watched the light in the branches. "If he is Rhaegar's son, he will want justice. If he is an impostor, he will want glory. Both are dangerous." Robert scowled, pulling a leaf from a low bough. "If I fall, if the South falls, you must keep the North safe, Lyanna. I was never meant for this crown, but you were always stronger than me." She smiled, a sadness in it. "We are who we are made, Robert. You wear your crown as well as any man can." He left soon after, grim and unsteady, refusing to linger for the feast Ned had prepared. "War waits for no man, not even a king," he grumbled, spurring his horse as dawn painted the sky. Winterfell waited. Lyanna kept order as best she could, teaching Robb diplomacy and Arya discipline, urging Sansa to trust her own wisdom. She walked the walls at midnight, listening to the hush of snow falling on stone, the distant call of wolves in the dark. She tended the crypts, lighting candles for her father and brothers, whispering the old prayers. Sometimes she took out the blue ribbon, twining it through her hair, remembering what it was to be young and reckless, and what it meant to survive. The summer war never came to the north, not truly. The fighting stayed south. The Golden Company battered against Storm's End and crushed at the Mander by Tyrell and Baratheon's swords. The Pretender's head was sent to King's Landing in a gilded cage. But the message had been sent. Dragons might rise again, and the peace was never more than a season away from ruin. Ned grew cautious, sending Robb to the Neck to learn from Howland, and Sansa to White Harbor to foster with Lord Manderley. Arya stayed at Winterfell, wild and half-grown, shadowing Lyanna everywhere. On the eve of the Harvest Festival, as stars spilled across the northern sky, Lyanna sat in the Godswood, Arya at her side, and spoke at last of the day she killed the king. She did not spare herself the horror, or Arya the weight of hard truths. "We do what we must, little wolf," she said, "even when it breaks us, even when no song will ever tell the truth of it. We live with our choices, and if we are lucky, we make something better from the ashes." "Nah." Arya pressed her hand, stubborn tears in her eyes. "I want to be brave like you, Aunt Lyanna. I want to protect everyone." Lyanna smiled, holding her close. "Then do it, Arya. Find your own way. Be your own wolf." The winter that followed was milder. The north prospered, the fields rich with barley and the rivers teeming with fish. Lyanna watched her nieces and nephews grow, saw Ned's children become strong, clever, kind. She found peace in small things. A quiet ride at dawn, a good harvest, the laughter of children, the slow turn of seasons. Rumors rose and fell, a dragon in the east, a shipwreck on Skagos, a murder in Old Town, a marriage in Dorne. She weighed each carefully, writing when needed, always watching, always ready. And when, many years later, a white raven came from the citadel, its wings bright against the pale dawn, Lyanna stood beside Ned as he broke the seal. "Winter has come," Ned said, voice steady. She looked out over the frost-bright fields, the snow gathering once more in the yard, and felt no fear. She was Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, daughter, sister, the wolf maid who had killed a king and saved a realm. The ghosts that followed her were hers to keep, and she walked with them into the long cold, unbowed and unbroken. In the halls of Winterfell, her legend endured, not in songs of war and blood, but in the quiet strength of a woman who met her fate and bent it, like the northern wind, to her own will. And when the winds howled at the doors and the snows piled high, the children of the north would gather by the fire, telling stories of the Stark who had changed the world, not by sword alone, but by the strength of her heart. Lyanna listened sometimes, smiling at their wild tales, the myths and truths braided together as tightly as the blue ribbon in her hair. And outside, beyond the walls, winter raged on. But inside Winterfell, hope endured, kindled by the fire that no storm could ever quench. Yeah, Kel. Autumn fires burned down to coals, and the first thin snows crept once more across the fields and forests of the north, whispering to Lyanna Stark that the years of peace and labor were only ever a borrowed gift. Old lessons ran deep in her bones, as did the memory of blood and vengeance. Still, in this golden stretch before winter's true grip, Winterfell hummed with a vibrant, almost fierce tranquility. A steadiness won not by luck, but by the patient tending of 1,000 wounds, the careful weaving of loyalty, and the watchful vigilance of the wolf maid who had once stolen the fate of kings. She watched the seasons wheel in patterns as intricate as the frost blooming on the windows. Arya grew wilder, faster, shadowing Lyanna from the kitchens to the archery range, soaking up stories of queens and conquerors, learning to ride bareback, to read a hunting trail, to judge a liar's eyes. Sansa, growing into her own beauty and cunning, wrote home from White Harbor with news of feasts, trade pacts, and suitors, her words full of longing and ambition both. Robb returned from the Neck taller, broader, his voice deepening and his sense of responsibility forming a kind of armor that neither sword nor sorrow could easily dent. Bran and Rickon flourished as only Northborn children could, quick with a joke, certain that the wolves would always run and the snow would always fall. Ned grew grayer at the temples. He bore the burdens of his office with an ease that fooled few who truly knew him. In council, he leaned on Lyanna as he once had on their father, trusting her to see the shape of things, to sense when a friendly word could cool a temper or when a mailed fist was needed. More often now, they walked together at dusk atop the walls, the wind lifting Lyanna's hair and making Ned's words carry. News from the south, word of bannermen's sons lost to illness or folly, questions about grain prices, all woven through with the underlying thread of readiness for what might come. "I fear the king grows tired," Ned confided one night, voice lost in the sighing of snow against stone. "Robert writes of hunting in tourneys, but there's little left of the fire in him. I see him giving more to the Lannisters, letting them coil around the court. If he weakens, Cersei and Tywin will not wait for the realm's invitation." "And is sure?" Lyanna nodded, her eyes distant. "We must be patient. The North has always outlasted the storms. Let Robert play his games for now. But keep our swords sharp and our larders full." They shared a rare smile, then watched the sun sink behind the old forest, the light bleeding out across the white lands, like a wound slowly closing. Ravens still brought rumors with the coming of each new season. The Reach simmered under Mace Tyrell's pride. The Vale remained aloof, Jon Arryn's health failing quietly behind the Aerys' implacable walls. Dorne sent more letters than soldiers, Doran Martell's honeyed assurances drifting up from the hot Southlands, never quite as sweet as he meant them. In the Far East, tales of dragonfire and silver-haired queens drifted in on the lips of merchants and maesters alike, but no ship on the narrow sea brought proof. Only stories, growing wilder as they moved from port to port. One day in early winter, as the fields froze and the wolves hunted closer to the walls, a letter arrived with the sigil of the Night's Watch, bearing Benjen's unmistakable hand. Lyanna's heart twisted with love and worry as she read aloud to the family in the great hall. "Dear ones, the wildlings press the Shadow Tower, more desperate each year. There are whispers, strange things in the woods at night, not just wolves and whites, but shadows on the snow, blue-eyed and silent. I have sent rangers further north than ever before. The wall stands, but some days I feel it shudder. I am well, and the brothers are strong. But I ask the old gods to watch over you all. The night is long, and I have learned to keep watch for the dawn. With love, Benjen." Arya looked up with questions in her eyes, Bran's brow furrowed. And even Ned sat long in silence after the meal was done. "I should ride north and see for myself," Ned muttered, half to himself, half to Lyanna as they walked the dark corridors. "Benjen is no alarmist. If he says there is trouble," she touched his arm, "if you go, the North will follow. Winterfell needs its lord. Wait, and let Benjen send clearer word. The watch is strong." "That you has done the one tower." He grunted but made no promise. The days grew colder. The rivers froze, and the woods filled with the bright music of axemen and the dull thunder of hunters returning with fresh game. Lyanna led the children on long rides, teaching them to find shelter in a storm, to read the sky for signs of thaw and freeze. She watched the old ways pass into the hands of a new generation and felt both hope and sorrow, knowing that each lesson learned might one day mean the difference between survival and death. One night, in the deep heart of winter, the ravens came in a black flock, carrying news not only from the wall, but from the south and east. At King's Landing, Jon Arryn was dead. Word was poison, though the small council declared it a fever. In Dorne, a ship from Braavos had docked, bringing tales of a girl with silver hair and dragons in her wake. In the Riverlands, Lord Hoster Tully's health faltered, and the Freys grew bolder in their ambitions. In the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister summoned banners, and rumors swirled of debts unpaid, of daggers in the dark. Ned read these letters in grim silence. Lyanna joined him by the fire, the air thick with the promise of storm. "We must be ready," he said. "If the king calls, I may have to go south." She met his eyes. "I will keep Winterfell safe, Ned. We are stronger than we once were. Stronger than I ever thought we could be." He hesitated. "If I do not return..." She caught his hand, her grip fierce. "You will return. But if you do not, I will do what must be done. The North will not fall." He looked at her a long moment, then nodded, grief and pride mingling in his eyes. As the snows thickened, Robert's summons came. Ned Stark was named Hand of the King. There was no refusing. Duty and honor chained him as surely as any prison. The household prepared for departure. Carts were loaded with winter stores for the journey south, and the deer wolves howled as if in warning. Lyanna walked the ramparts with Ned the night before his leaving. The world hushed and blue beneath the stars. "Do you trust Robert?" she asked at last, quiet as falling snow. "I trust him as a brother," Ned said, "but not as a king. The court is not the North, Lyanna. Their knives are sharp and their oaths are thin as ice." "Then remember who you are and who loves you," she said. "Let them play their games. Remember Winterfell." He kissed her brow. "Always." With Ned's party rode Sansa and Arya, desperate for southern adventure, Bran for the promise of knighthood, and a retinue of guards sworn to House Stark. Lyanna stood at the gates as they rode out, holding Rickon's hand, her heart full of pride and dread. The days passed. Ravens came and went. Lyanna ruled in Ned's absence, strong and fair. She met with lords, settled disputes, and watched the snow gather deeper on the walls. She wrote to Sansa and Arya, to Ned and Benjen, her letters full of news and gentle warnings, always ending with the old northern blessing. The North remembers. One morning, a stranger arrived at the gate, his cloak dusted with frost, and his eyes sharp with secrets. He carried a letter sealed in black wax, and his words were urgent. "There is danger in King's Landing. The Queen plots, and the Lannisters sharpen their claws. The dragon stirs in the east. Your brother is surrounded by enemies. Winter is coming, Lady Stark. All the old powers move. Next Sentinel." Lyanna read the letter, her heart pounding. She summoned her council. Roderick, Maester Luwin, Howland Reed come up from the neck. They debated, argued, measured every word. "We cannot move south, not without proof," said Roderick. "But we cannot sit idle if the king is in peril." Lyanna listened, then spoke, her voice cold and clear. "We will wait, and we will watch. I will send trusted eyes to King's Landing, men who owe loyalty to no southern lord. And I will send word to the Eyrie, to Dorne, to the Riverlands. If the south burns, we will not burn alone." Nanawamsani. A tense winter passed, the kind that presses the breath from lungs and the hope from the heart. Lyanna stood each day on the walls, scanning the white horizon for riders. Ravens brought rumors and truths, Ned's honor clashing with southern cunning, Sansa's misery in a court of wolves and serpents, Arya's wildness growing, her letters rare and coded. News of Bran's fall reached them, and Lyanna's heart broke afresh, though she steeled herself before the household. Then came the news that shattered the last illusion of safety. Ned accused the Queen, was arrested in the throne room, and Sansa begged mercy at Joffrey's feet. Arya vanished into the city's shadows. The North erupted in grief and rage. Lyanna acted with the speed and clarity born of old pain. She called the banners, sending riders to every holdfast and watchtower. Ravens flew to White Harbor, to the Neck, to the Wall. She met with the bannermen in the Great Hall, her cloak thrown back, the wolf's head brooch at her throat. "We have been betrayed," she told them. "My brother is held by enemies, his daughters are in peril, the crown sits on a liar's brow. I ask you now, not as your lady, but as your kin, will you ride for House Stark? Will you avenge Ned and protect our own?" A roar answered her. Old men beat fists on tables, young lords drew swords and pledged blood and steel. The North would ride to war, not for conquest, but for justice. War raged. The banners of House Stark unfurled across the green and white, joined by the tall pines of the Manderless, the leaping trout of Tully, the reeds of Howland, the crescent moons of the Cerwins. Lyanna's household grew. Girls became shield maidens. Boys trained as squires, even the old joined in, mending harness, tending wounded. She led by example, never shrinking from the pain, never hiding from the truth. Robb was declared king in the North, young and proud. His council held in Winterfell's solar, Lyanna at his side as advisor, confidant, and, when needed, conscience. She counseled caution where his blood ran hot, reminded him of oaths and old grudges, steadied his hand when the world threatened to sweep him away. Aerys' letters reached them, smuggled by 100 hands, cryptic but alive. Sansa's silence weighed heavier, and Lyanna dreamed of her niece, alone and frightened in the lion's den. Bran, though broken in body, grew wise and strange, his dreams echoing with the voices of old gods. Lyanna rode with the host to the twins, her sword at her hip. She negotiated with Walder Frey, reading his slyness, matching it with stark pride and northern bluntness. When the wedding was done, and the crossing won, she pressed Robb to remember who their friends were, and more importantly, who they could never trust. The war went south, and Lyanna remained at Winterfell, ruling as regent. She fortified the castle, sent food to the camps, tended the wounded and orphaned, walked the crypts by candlelight, whispering prayers for the living and the dead. She became a legend in her own time. The Lady Wolf, the Sword of Winterfell, the voice that spoke when the North needed truth more than comfort. Winter thickened. The others stirred in the far north, and news from the Wall grew dire. Benjen's last raven spoke of dead men walking, of the Wall's magic failing, of the night growing colder, longer, wilder. Robb fell in the south, betrayed at the Red Wedding, his banners broken, his cause shattered. The news reached Lyanna at dawn. She wept in the Godswood, her face hidden against the heart tree, then rose and donned her armor, the wolf's head brooch glinting. She summoned the last of the lords, the household knights, the survivors who refused to yield. The North will not kneel, she declared. The pack endures. She held the line through the darkest years, when Winterfell burned, when the Boltons hunted the last wolves, when Sansa returned thin and fierce and unbroken, when Arya slipped in from the night, older and wilder, sword at her hip, vengeance in her eyes. Lyanna stood at the heart of the storm, never wavering, holding Winterfell for the next spring. And at last, when the snows began to melt and the dead were broken by fire and dawn, the North found peace once more. Jon Snow returned, bearing secrets, scars, and the weight of a world remade. The children of Stark rebuilt the halls, planted the fields, honored the lost, and looked toward a future hard-won but unbowed. Lyanna watched them, pride fierce and bright in her eyes. She walked the rebuilt halls, telling stories of the old days, of the night she killed a king and saved a city, of the choices that defined her and her house. She became the wise woman of Winterfell, sought for counsel, revered by all who knew her. Her legend outlived her, sung in every corner of the North, told by every fire when the winds howled and the night seemed endless. The wolf maid who slew the Dragon King, who stood for the North through war and winter, whose courage shaped the fate of king. And when at last Lyanna Stark's bones lay in the crypt beside her father and brothers, a blue ribbon wound in her hair, and the wolf's head brooch at her breast, the people of the North gathered to mourn and to celebrate. Snow drifted down, soft and clean, and the wind sang her name. So ended the story of the woman who changed the fate of kingdoms and taught the world that even in the longest night, the fire of hope could never be quenched. The North remembered, and would remember, as long as winter came, and the wolves still howled beneath the cold bright stars. Years passed, leaving their quiet watermark on the stones and faces of Winterfell. Time did not heal every wound, nor did it quiet every ghost, but in the shadow of hardship, resilience thrived. The North rebuilt itself from ashes, slower than the South perhaps, but with the surety of seasons, frost yielding to thaw, sowing to reaping, loss to hard-won peace. Lyanna Stark became the fixed star around which the house revolved. The banners that once snapped in mourning for lost sons, now lifted in the bright, clear air of spring, showing the direwolf's head, gray on white, above fields flush with new green. She moved with unhurried confidence among the people, farmer and lord, steward and stableboy alike. They looked to her as a living legend, and she wore their reverence, not as a crown, but as a mantle of quiet duty. The wolf maid had become the wise lady, her temper mellowed, but her will unbroken. She rarely spoke of the war years. When she did, it was not to boast, but to teach. To the children at her knee, Robb's own Sansa's, Aerys, the orphans taken in from distant villages. She told of courage that was never certainty, of choices weighed in the silence of midnight, of the price of both mercy and necessity. The story of Aerys's death passed from her lips with unvarnished honesty. She did not claim heroism, only necessity. Sometimes you must act because no one else will, and you carry what comes after for the rest of your days. That is the way of wolves and of rulers. The years brought change, as they always did. Bran, grown taller and paler, spent his days in the Godswood, speaking in riddles that even Lyanna struggled to follow. He walked the world in dreams, and what he learned in those journeys came back as warnings or promises, or simple, cryptic truths. Rickon ran wild as a young wolf, fierce and bright-eyed, forever chasing the shadows of his older siblings. Arya and Sansa both forged new paths. Arya as a wanderer, never quite at home within any walls. Sansa as a wise and beloved lady of White Harbor, whose letters home shone with warmth and humor, and the unmistakable steel of stark resolve. In her own life, Lyanna found a rare and private contentment. She never married. By her own choice, she would say to any who asked, and many did. She had suitors aplenty, sons of lords, proud knights, even the occasional prince. But she turned them all away with gentle dignity. Some whispered of an old grief, of blue roses pressed between pages and a prince's song sung beneath a tree at Harrenhal. But those were rumors, and Lyanna herself let them drift like snowflakes on the wind. Instead, her days filled with the needs of her people. The North was vast, and in peace as in war, it demanded strong hands and clearer minds. She managed stores, heard disputes, oversaw the teaching of children and the welfare of the poor. In the cold months, she saw that none went hungry. In the bright days of planting, she joined the laborers in the fields, sleeves rolled up, laughing with the women as they scattered seed. She rode with her guards to distant holdfasts, her presence calming ancient feuds and settling new claims. Every few years, she made the long journey south for counsel, her arrival in King's Landing causing a ripple of whispers in the capital's corridors. The Southerners remembered the tales. The wolf-maid who killed a king, who stood for the North when the world burned. To the Lannisters she was a wary ally. To the Tyrells, an enigma. To Dorne, a reminder of debts never settled. But she kept her own counsel, speaking seldom and listening much. It was on one such visit, years after the last war, that Lyanna found herself walking the garden paths of the Red Keep at dusk, moonlight glimmering off the marble. She met with Queen Margaery, who walked with Sansa, and with Tyrion Lannister, who sat alone in the shadow of a weeping willow, sharp-eyed and quiet. "It's strange," Tyrion remarked as she sat beside him. "The realm so often looks to the south for answers, yet again and again, the north survives what the rest of us cannot." Lyanna studied the moon's reflection. The north remembers. We do not forget our dead, nor the lessons of hardship. When you carry your ancestors in your bones, you walk more carefully. And your own legend. Tyrion's smile was wry, edged with old pain. "Does that weigh as heavily as ancestors?" She shrugged. "A wolf's movement. Evasive but honest. I am only what the North needs. The stories are for others to tell." He raised his cup. "May we all be so fortunate." The peace lasted, longer than any dared hope. New troubles rose and were met. When Dothraki raiders appeared on the western coast, Lyanna rode to parley with their Khal, speaking the old tongues learned from traders in her youth. When disease struck in White Harbor, she sent healers and grain, refusing to let pride keep her people hungry. She never raised an army unless she must, but when bandits or would-be kings threatened her borders, she answered with swift and unyielding force. Justice in her domain was fair, but it did not flinch. Ravens still came. Warnings from the east, tales of dragons and broken chains, whispers of distant wars. The world changed around Winterfell, but within its walls, the heart of the North remained the same. Stubborn, compassionate, watchful. Robb's sons and daughters grew into adulthood, each with their own strengths and storms. Arya's children, wild as their mother, learned both sword and song at their aunt's knee. Rickon married a girl from Bear Island, bringing her fierce kin south to raise a new generation of wolf-blooded children. Bran grew stranger, always a little apart, but his wisdom guided the family through more than one shadowed threat. There were losses, as there must be. Old friends gone to winter. Old enemies re-emerging only to be swept aside by the unity of the North. The world beyond the wall changed too. Wildlings now friends, not foes. Their children raised beside Stark's scions. The Night's Watch rebuilt, their vows renewed, their faces younger with each passing year. One bitterly cold night, Lyanna climbed to the highest tower, lantern in hand, to look out over the land she had helped shape. She remembered the sound of Aerys's mad laughter, the hiss of wildfire, the silence after Robert's charge at the Trident. She remembered Ned's steady voice, Benjen's last letter, the bright laughter of children grown into their own legends. She closed her eyes and whispered the names of those gone, one by one, letting the wind carry her prayers to the godswood. That winter was harsh, but the North endured. Lyanna moved among her people with a slower gait, but a sharper mind, her hair now streaked with silver, her eyes still fierce as a January storm. The young called her Mother of the North, the old called her the last of the true wolves. She brushed aside both titles, but took pride in the laughter and peace she saw blooming within her walls. When at last her time drew near, Lyanna gathered her family in the godswood, beneath the weirwood tree whose face had watched over so many generations. She spoke not of war, but of love and endurance, of duty and forgiveness. The world will always change, she told them. There will always be new kings, new enemies, new seasons. But you are Starks, and you are of the North. Remember what that means. They buried her with honor, laying her beside Ned, Benjen, and the Lost of Winterfell, a blue ribbon bound in her hair, the wolf's head brooch clasped to her breast. The songs written after called her the Queen of Winter, the Wolf Maid, the hand that held the North together. But to those who knew her best, she was simply Lyanna, the sister who stood her ground, the aunt who dried tears, the woman who changed the shape of a kingdom through the simple, unyielding act of refusing to surrender hope. Spring came again, as it always did. Wolves howled beneath the moon. Children ran laughing through fields of wildflowers, and in the heart of Winterfell, the fire never died. The North remembered, the pack endured, and Lyanna's legend became the quiet strength behind every hard winter, every dark night, every dawn that broke the spell of fear with the promise of hope renewed. The years unspooled through the North as they always had, slow as rivers through the hills, silent as snow. The rhythm of seasons echoing the quiet pulse of duty that shaped Lyanna Stark's life and legend. Yet even legend is, in the end, a sequence of ordinary days made weighty by remembrance. She moved through her final decades as a gentle force, unyielding when winter pressed hard, merciful when the weak or the broken came seeking shelter beneath Winterfell's eaves. Decades ripened, faded. The children of her kin came into their own. Rickon's children ranged the wolfswood, bright-eyed and wild as moonlight. Robb's sons grew tall, and his daughter bore the measured courtesy of both her mother and her aunt. Sansa's children rode each spring from White Harbor, cloaks silver bright, speaking the southern tongue as easily as the northern, bringing laughter to the old gray halls. Arya's line, wilder still, ran between Winterfell and the sea, sailors and explorers who brought stories of distant bravos, of golden lands where snow never fell, of far-off markets where even the tale of the Wolf Maid was known. Bran was the last to leave. In a sense, his body remained, his mind ranging beyond, so that he was sometimes present, and sometimes only a distant echo. But he guided Winterfell's memory, and in time even the maesters would call him Greenseer, and seek his wisdom when omens troubled the land. It was Lyanna who ensured Bran's keepers and acolytes remained honest, and the ravenry at Winterfell became the envy of the Citadel, for there was little that happened in Westeros the Starks did not know. Lyanna herself aged with dignity, her back unbent, her eyes clear, her voice as gentle as snowfall, and as sharp as an icicle when she chose. Winterfell's people aged alongside her. Lord Manderley's sons visited often, bringing salted cod and gossip from White Harbor. The Reeds still came north each year with marsh eels, news of hidden things in the neck, and secrets from south and east. The lords of Bear Island visited at every changing of the season, their she-bears fierce as ever, their daughters honored as squires and shield maidens within Winterfell's court. Time's changes came gently at first. The white knife froze later, and thawed earlier. The great packs of wolves faded into legend, until their occasional howls in the far woods seemed ghostly, rare, and precious. Old enemies faded. Boltons and Karstarks were only names now. Their lines ended or wedded into others, their castles standing lonely, half-ruined, sometimes used for feasting and tournaments, sometimes only as wayposts for trade. It was in this peace, hard-won, and always guarded with the iron will of those who had known true loss, that Lyanna found a new kind of purpose. She founded the Winterfell School, opening its doors to orphaned children from across the north and beyond. They learned letters and numbers, sword and song, the old gods and the new. Some left for the citadel, others rode south to serve in great houses, but most returned home to till fields or tend hearths, carrying with them the memory of a lady whose stern face broke into sudden, rare, and unforgettable laughter. It was said she could make peace between any rivals in the north, settle any land dispute, still any brawl in the yard with a word or a lifted brow. Her justice was renowned, but it was her kindness that endured. If a child was orphaned, she found them kin. If a woman's husband died at sea, Lyanna saw that her sons had work and her daughters had dowry. She never raised her voice unless she must, but the memory of her wrath, shown only to those who abused their power, kept petty lords in line better than any mailed fist. Travelers from the south still came, sometimes hoping to test the legend, sometimes simply seeking wisdom. Lords from Dorne and Old Town, the Reach, and even the Crownlands made pilgrimage to her halls. They found not a warrior queen, nor a cold recluse, but a gray-haired lady with eyes bright as storm, who listened first and judged only when she must. Some went away disappointed, seeking drama and receiving only patience. Others went away changed, bearing the subtle, indelible mark of the North. As years passed, the realm beyond Winterfell spun through new chaos, succession crises, wars in distant Essos, the slow decay of old bloodlines, and the rise of new. But the North, as always, held. The walls of Winterfell thickened with each generation. Trade routes flourished with White Harbor, and the neck remained impassable, except to friends. The Ironborn tried their luck a few times, but found the North no easier prey than in centuries past. Lyanna kept close counsel with the Godswood. Each year, she knelt beneath the heart tree at dawn, recalling the names of the dead: Rickard, Brandon, Benjen, Ned, Robb, and all those who had fallen so she might live. She never forgot the price of peace. Each name was a stone in her foundation, a lesson, and a benediction. She wrote often. Her letters became prized in every noble library from Old Town to Gulltown. She wrote of northern law, of the old ways, of war and peacemaking, of mercy and judgment, and above all, of hope. She corresponded with maesters, with merchant lords, with poets, with children eager for tales of her youth. She wrote, too, to Robert Baratheon's descendants, telling them truths that only she and Ned had known, keeping old promises, forging new ones. The world shifted, but certain things did not. Each winter, the first snows brought all the scattered kin of House Stark home. The halls rang with laughter, stories, new marriages, children's games. Arya's brood would tumble in, faces wind-burned, bringing spices and bright cloth from far lands. Rickon's children would howl with the dire wolves on cold, clear nights. Bran's wards would marvel at the green men's wisdom, their tales both strange and true. It was on one such winter's night, many years from the war, that Lyanna felt her strength finally flag. She climbed, with the help of Arya's youngest son, to the highest tower, and looked out across the moonlit snows, listening for the distant call of wolves. The wind was sharp, but she stood straight and proud, wrapped in her old gray cloak. From there, she saw the flickering lights of every farm and hamlet, every beacon fire along the King's Road, and she felt the heartbeat of the North as steady as her own. She descended before dawn, moving quietly through the sleeping halls. In the Godswood, she knelt for a long time before the Weirwood, and when she rose, she was ready. She spent the next days with each of her family, listening, advising, pressing blue ribbons into small hands, telling old stories, and laughing in the firelight. She sang a lullaby to Sansa's youngest, walked the walls with Rickon's eldest, and helped Bran's pupils memorize the old words. In the end, her passing was as gentle as a falling leaf. She died in her bed, snow drifting down outside, the wolf's head brooch at her throat, and her family gathered close. Her last words were for her kin, spoken quietly. "Endure, and be kind." That is all. The North mourned for a year and a day. Poets wrote new songs. Storytellers came from every corner of Westeros to hear her legend and carry it home. In the spring, the family gathered in the Godswood and buried her beside the heart tree, as she had wished. The blue ribbon fluttered from a low branch, and the children planted wildflowers over her grave. Winterfell changed, but never forgot. The school thrived, the keep flourished, the banners flew, and the wolves still hunted in the deep woods. The world turned on, and the story of Lyanna Stark passed from memory to myth, not as a tale of war or blood, but as a quiet lesson in strength, mercy, and the enduring fire of hope. And when the storms came, as they always did, the people of the North remembered that theirs was a land built by those who loved fiercely and guarded well, by the wolf maid who once slew a king and then spent a lifetime healing the world he had broken. The heart tree wept red sap, but the living smiled. In the shadow of its branches, every spring, the children ran and played, and from the walls, the old ones watched and told the tale anew of Lyanna, who bore winter's weight with a light step and left the world better than she found it. Her memory as lasting as snow beneath the silent stars. Egei. Seasons became a river running slow and deep, carrying the generations onward. The faces of the old Stark line transformed by time, the halls of Winterfell echoing with laughter and grief in equal measure. The shadow Lyanna Stark cast across the North was not the chill of old ghosts, but the gentle bracing shade of an ancient tree, protective, enduring, full of stories. Her legend was no longer only her own. It was stitched into the banners that flew from the battlements, whispered in the prayers of the humble, and woven into the memory of every child born beneath the gray sky. Decades after the breaking of the Great Wars, Winterfell became more than a fortress. It was a beacon, a place where the scattered threads of loyalty, wisdom, and survival were gathered and knotted. The North had known famine and betrayal, flood and flame, but Lyanna's era became known as the time when wounds, old and new, were healed not by vengeance, but by slow, steadfast attention to the living. People came to Winterfell seeking justice and found fairness. They came in hunger and found bread. They came in despair and found welcome. The house's hospitality was legendary, but it was never ostentatious. Every guest knew that the hearth's warmth was purchased by the host's vigilance and sacrifice. There was never a single winter that was more bitter than the rest, nor a harvest so poor that hope failed. Yet through all, the old stories held their power. Children sat at Lyanna's feet as she grew old, listening to tales of her father's honor, her brother's fierce love, the long night at the Red Keep, and the moment when one girl's courage ended the madness of a king. She did not embellish. Her telling was spare, the words like smooth stones in a stream, well worn and measured for truth. She spoke less of the war as time went on, more of the years that followed, of the daily labor of keeping the peace and loving one's kin. "It is easy to take up a sword," she would say, "but it is harder to lay it down, and hardest of all, to build what war has broken." Her words became lessons, not only to the Starks, but to their friends and former foes. The children of the Manderleys and the Umbers, and even of House Frey, cleansed by years and new marriages, were sent to Winterfell to be fostered and taught. Lyanna insisted on this, not to display her power, but to build a peace that would outlast any one generation. The school she had begun with her own hands grew into a small academy, and in its halls were learned both the laws of men and the mysteries of the old gods. From across Westeros and the lands beyond the wall, children came, wildlings, crannogmen, the children of merchants from Bravos or Dorne, all learning the same lessons of resilience, compassion, and the quiet pride of the North. Lyanna's own kin flourished. Sansa's children inherited her wit and poise, and sometimes her melancholy, but under Lyanna's steady hand, they learned not to let sorrow master them. Aerys' wild progeny, boys and girls with the stark look in their eyes, were fierce and clever, but Lyanna tempered their fire, teaching them to think before they struck. Rickon's family grew into stout wardens of the Wolfswood and keen traders, their laughter echoing through the great hall. Bran, who had long ago become something half-rooted in the weirwoods, visited rarely in person, but sent ravens thick with riddles and wisdom, and every now and then his pale-eyed descendants would appear, carrying a mystery in their bearing that reminded Lyanna of the old legends. The world beyond Winterfell changed, as it always did. The dragons never truly returned. Rumors flared and died. Would-be conquerors tried and failed to seize the Iron Throne, and Essos fell into its own chaos, its distant flames little more than distant storms on the horizon. King's Landing rose and fell in the endless tide of power, but rarely did its intrigues trouble the North, for it was known that to move against Winterfell was to stir a hornet's nest. The North did not forget, and it did not forgive lightly. But those who came in peace found a welcome unmatched elsewhere. Every few years, the North would send an embassy to the South, and Lyanna, even in her final age, made at least one such journey. She went not as a conqueror, nor as a supplicant, but as an equal. In council, her words cut to the bone, but she was careful never to humiliate her peers. When tempers rose, she quelled them with a look, and when the time for laughter came, her joy was infectious. Many southern lords, skeptical at first of the Stark matriarch, left those meetings with renewed respect, and more than once sought her judgment on matters of law or tradition. But it was at home, in the slow turning of the seasons, that Lyanna's legacy deepened. She was the one who rode out each spring to greet the farmers returning to their fields, who judged the livestock shows at harvest, who sang the old songs at the fires with the children and the aged. She walked the walls each night, never allowing herself the complacency of an easy peace, but always searching the horizon for signs of threat. If a band of outlaws harried the roads, she dispatched riders. If famine threatened, she organized relief. If a storm tore down the King's Road, she sent workers before dawn to mend the breach. In her old age, Lyanna's hair went white as snow, and her gait grew slower. Her eyes, though, lost none of their clarity. People began to say that to be judged by the Lady of Winterfell was to face one's truest self, not because she sought to find fault, but because she believed everyone capable of better. Her justice was never vengeful, but always demanding. The pack survives, she would remind those who erred, when each does their part. That is what it means to be of the North. Many. When illness finally found her, she faced it as she had all things, without self-pity and with careful preparation. She summoned her kin, each in turn, to her solar. To the eldest she gave charge of the castle. To the youngest, her favorite blue ribbon. To the wild ones, her blessing to roam. To the sorrowful, she gave comfort. To the proud, a reminder to remain humble. To the wavering, encouragement that they could carry what was to come. She wrote letters to old friends in the South, her handwriting still firm, thanking them for their alliance and kindness, asking them to honor the next Lady or Lord of Winterfell as they had honored her. At last, as winter broke into a sharp, clear spring, she asked to be carried into the Godswood. There, beneath the heart tree, surrounded by those she had loved and served, she offered her final blessing. Remember what we have endured and what we have built. Remember that winter always ends. Take care of each other, and take care of the North. I am not afraid. The gods have been kind. Ray. She slipped away with the sun warming her face, the last sound in her ears, the wind in the branches, and the laughter of her great-grandchildren playing in the snowmelt. They buried her at the roots of the heart tree, with a cairn of smooth stones and wildflowers gathered from every corner of the North. The blue ribbon, old and faded but lovingly preserved, was tied to the lowest branch. The wolves howled for 3 nights, and every household in the north lit a candle for Lyanna Stark, the wolf maid, the Lady of Winterfell, the last and truest memory of the old blood. Her story became more than legend. It became the foundation on which every Stark child, every student, every guest built their own story of courage and mercy. The North was not softer for her years, but it was wiser. And it endured as only the North could endure, with heads unbowed, hearts united, and eyes always set on the long horizon. And so the world turned, and the fires of Winterfell never died. As long as snow fell and the wolves ran, the memory of Lyanna Stark would linger, patient and eternal, the silent heart at the center of the storm.